I watched the sheriff put handcuffs on my son in the conference room where we were supposed to sign away my vineyard. Malcolm was 38 years old. I raised him to love this land the way his father and I did. But the papers spread across that mahogany table told a different story. 8 months of fraud, systematic theft, and a scheme to fake my incompetence so he could steal $42 million from the woman who gave him life. My name is Carolyn Stone. I'm 65 years old. My late husband James and I built Stone Valley Vineyards from nothing 40 years ago. We planted every vine, weathered every drought, survived every threat, except the one that came from inside our own family. I spent 8 months pretending to be the confused old woman my son needed me to be. And when he finally felt safe enough to show his true face, I made sure the authorities were watching. The deputy read him his Miranda rights while my daughter-in-law Lori stood frozen at the defense table. They thought I was declining, confused. An old woman whose trembling hands and 65 years made her easy prey. They put sedatives in my wine for months to make me seem senile. They forged medical documents. They planned to sell my life's work to a foreign conglomerate and pocket the difference. But I recorded everything. I built the case brick by brick, while they thought I was too old and fragile to fight back. When Malcolm grabbed my wrist that morning and threatened to burn the vineyard unless I signed, the brooch on my collar captured every word. Before I tell you how a mother destroys her own child to save what she built, please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to choose between justice and family.
Hit the subscribe button. You'll understand every choice I made.
But let me start from the beginning. The day I realized my own son was poisoning me. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, leave a comment. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself? Just yes or no. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Quick note, some details are fictionalized to strengthen the message. What truly matters is the lesson at its heart. My hand shook as I held the pen above the signature line, and my son smiled like he believed the tremor was real. My name is Carolyn Stone, 65 years old, and for 8 months I've let my son believe a stroke stole my mind. The kitchen table between us held what Malcolm called medical insurance forms, spread across the oak surface where my late husband James and I used to plan harvest schedules. Odd autumn morning light filtered through the window, illuminating dust motes and the careful trap my son was setting. "Just a signature here, Mom," Malcolm said, tapping the designated line with his perfectly manicured finger. "The new insurance provider needs this for your ongoing care." His voice dripped sympathy, but his eyes watched my trembling hand like a banker watching collateral. Malcolm Stone, my 38-year-old son, set the papers before me with the patient smile of someone who thinks I can't read anymore. I let the pen waver, deliberately dragging out the performance I'd perfected over months of pretending. "Take your time," he said. "I know writing is still difficult for you." Difficult. I'd signed partnership agreements worth millions with this same hand. I'd built Stone Valley Vineyards from bare dirt with James, managing our finances through 40 years of harvest cycles and market crashes. But Malcolm needed to believe that competence died with my supposed stroke. So I gave him the confused widow he wanted to see. The coffee beside me had gone cold an hour ago. I could smell it. Bitter. Oversteeped. Mixed with the faint scent of Malcolm's expensive cologne. Something imported. Something James would have called wasteful. I forced my eyes to scan the form slowly, letting them appear unfocused while my mind worked at full speed. That's when I saw it. Column 3, row 7. Buried in what should have been pure medical authorization language, vineyard revenue figures for spring quarter. The number read $847,000. But I remembered the distribution contracts we'd signed in May. We'd cleared over $1 million. How long does a son practice that tone? The one that sounds like love but measures like an appraiser. "Something wrong, Mom." Malcolm leaned forward. "You're staring at the page." I let my face stay slack, confused. "Just trying to focus, sweetheart. Eyes aren't what they were." The lie tasted like copper on my tongue, metallic and sharp. My eyes worked perfectly. It was my son who couldn't see clearly anymore, couldn't see that 40 years as CFO of a successful vineyard meant I could spot altered revenue figures, even while pretending not to understand my own name. I signed. The pen scratched across paper with appropriate shakiness, each letter wobbling just enough to sell the performance. Malcolm's shoulders relaxed immediately. He collected the papers with visible relief, the kind of body language that said he'd been worried I might actually read what I was signing. Perfect, Mom. This will help us take better care of you. Better care. He meant better control. 8 months of playing helpless. 8 months of watching him build a cage with paperwork. I'll handle everything, he said, already moving toward the kitchen door. You just rest. His footsteps quickened once he thought I couldn't observe him anymore, the careful patience dropping away like a mask. I sat alone at the table, sunlight warming the documents he'd left behind, the ones he thought I was too confused to examine. The coffee cup felt cold and smooth under my fingertips. Malcolm's footsteps faded toward his office, and I sat alone with my cold coffee and hot certainty. The revenue numbers didn't lie, but my son did. The question was how deep the deception ran, and how much time I had before the next signature he needed would steal everything James and I built from bare dirt and faith. By afternoon, I knew the depth of Malcolm's lies extended beyond altered paperwork. The wine cellar's temperature dropped 15 degrees the moment we descended, and Malcolm's voice echoed off century-old stone as he introduced the appraiser who would value everything we'd built. Mr. Norwood comes highly recommended by the International Wine Valuation Association, Malcolm said, guiding my wheelchair down the ramp James had installed 30 years ago. He'll ensure we get fair market value for the transition. Transition, not sale. The word choice wasn't accidental. Fletcher Norwood, 55 and carrying credentials in his leather portfolio, moved through our barrel room like someone who knew the difference between honest assessment and sanctioned theft. He extended his hand, and I let mine shake appropriately as I gripped his fingers. Mrs. Stone, it's an honor, he said. Your 2019 Reserve Cabernet won Wine Spectator's top rating. My husband, he loved this cellar, I slurred, letting my head loll slightly. Built it himself. The cool underground air smelled of aging wine and oak tannins. 300 barrels, arranged in perfect rows the way James had designed them. Malcolm positioned himself near the entrance, phone already in hand. While Fletcher began his methodical examination, I watched him check vintage markers and inventory logs, his practiced movements revealing decades of expertise. 20 minutes passed. Fletcher worked his way deeper into the cellar, reaching the 1987 reserve section where our oldest vintages rested. Malcolm stayed near the entrance, absorbed in his phone screen, 30 feet away and distracted. Fletcher positioned himself between my wheelchair and Malcolm's sightline. His professional expression never changed as he leaned close, ostensibly adjusting my blanket against the cellar's chill. The climate control system is remarkable for a structure this old, he said at normal volume. Then, barely a whisper. Mrs. Stone, the offer they showed me is $15 million below actual market value. Did you approve this sale? $15 million. The number landed like a stone into still water, ripples spreading through every assumption I'd made about my son's intentions. Every cell in my body wanted to scream no, to grab Fletcher's arm and beg for help. But Malcolm stood 10 feet away, and 40 years of business negotiations had taught me when to show my hand and when to wait. I let my mouth work soundlessly, eyes unfocused, playing the stroke victim who couldn't process complex information. Fletcher's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Disappointment or understanding? I couldn't tell which. The scent of oak and fermenting grapes filled my nose as I struggled to breathe normally. Touch the wheelchair armrest, count to 5. Don't break character. Then the cellar door hinges creaked, a sound I knew from 40 years, and it never came without warning footsteps first. I thought everyone might need water. Lori Stone, my daughter-in-law of 12 years, descended the stairs with her trademark brilliant smile and a refreshment tray I hadn't asked for. It's so cold down here. Mom, are you warm enough? Her timing was flawless. Too flawless. Perfect timing, sweetheart, Malcolm called, pocketing his phone. Mr. Norwood was just finishing the reserve assessment. Fletcher stepped back smoothly, his professional mask settling into place like armor. Yes, I have everything I need for now. I'll prepare the preliminary report. Lori set the tray on a barrel head and fussed with my blanket, positioning herself where she could watch both Fletcher and me. Her fingers felt warm against my cold hands as she tucked the wool tighter. But her eyes were calculating distances and angles, making sure no whispered conversations could happen without her noticing. Fletcher straightened, his professional mask perfect again as Lori fussed with my blanket. But his eyes held a question he couldn't voice. Did I understand what he'd just told me? I let my head droop, as if exhausted by the cold. But my mind was racing. 15 million stolen before the ink dried, and my daughter-in-law standing guard to make sure I never learned the truth. That evening, I understood the surveillance extended beyond interrupted conversations in cellars. The living room filled with amber light from the setting sun. And I heard Lori's footsteps approaching with the glass I'd trusted for 243 consecutive evenings. Here we are, Mom. Lori set the crystal tumbler on the side table beside my chair, the liquid inside catching the firelight. Your evening supplement. Dr. Harrison says consistency is key to your circulation therapy. Dr. Harrison, the family physician who never questioned, never probed, just signed whatever prescriptions Malcolm requested. The supplement powder dissolved in our own Pinot Noir created a ruby mixture that smelled of vanilla oak and something faintly medicinal beneath. Lori adjusted my blanket with practiced care, dimming the lamp to what she called comfortable levels. Across the room, Malcolm sat with his laptop open, appearing absorbed in spreadsheets, but positioned where he could observe without seeming to watch. The arrangement wasn't accidental. Don't forget to help her hold the glass, sweetheart, he said without looking up. Her hands are weaker at night. Weaker at night. Or weaker after the morning dose and the afternoon tea and whatever else they'd been feeding me that I hadn't questioned because grieving widows are supposed to accept help from loving families. Lori lifted the glass toward my lips. Tomorrow's the final inventory audit before Mr. Norwood files his report, right? Malcolm's fingers paused on his keyboard. Yes, everything needs to be documented properly. His eyes lifted from the screen, meeting mine over Lori's shoulder. For one unguarded instant, I saw past the concerned son performance to what lived beneath. No warmth. No grief for my supposed decline, just pure assessment. Like a banker evaluating collateral that might default. When Lori turned back to me, his expression instantly reshaped into loving worry. But I'd seen it. The calculation. The arithmetic where a mother should have been. How many times can a mother see her child's face and not recognize that the love died years ago, replaced by arithmetic? There you go, Lori coaxed, tipping the glass gently. Just a little sip. The liquid touched my tongue and I finally recognized what I'd ignored for 8 months. Beneath the wine's familiar notes, beneath the artificial sweetener they added to mask it, there was a distinct bitterness. Not vitamins, not circulation therapy. Something designed to cloud thought, to make sharp minds drift and forget the questions they meant to ask. I swallowed because they were watching, and Malcolm would notice if I resisted. The supplement settled warm in my throat, tasting of oak and vanilla and chemical compliance. Such a good patient, Mom. Lori set the empty glass aside, patting my hand. The touch felt warm, but her eyes measured my reaction the same way Malcolm's had, checking if the dose was taking effect. I'll take her up to bed in 20 minutes, Malcolm said, closing his laptop with decisive click. The supplement works faster if she rests immediately after. Works faster, not helps. Works. Like machinery, like a tool performing its function. 8 months of this bitter glass. 243 evenings of swallowing whatever kept me silent while my son sold my legacy piece by piece. I felt the familiar fog beginning to cloud my thoughts, the chemical veil they'd drawn over my mind every single night. My eyelids grew heavy, muscles relaxing against my will. I let my head droop against the chair cushion, let my eyes go unfocused as Malcolm and Lori exchanged satisfied glances. They thought I was fading into compliance. They had no idea I was counting down to the moment I could think clearly again. The fog would lift by dawn, the way it always did, except this time. I wouldn't spend the morning wondering why my memory felt fuzzy. This time, I'd know exactly what they'd done to me, and I'd know exactly who to call first. I woke at 5:30 to find the chemical fog lighter than usual, my mind sharp enough to recognize the window of clarity before Lori arrived with morning pills at 7. By dawn, I'd make my first move. The house was silent as I dressed, maintaining my shuffle through the hallway even though no one watched at this hour. Habit. Or maybe insurance against cameras I hadn't found yet. The pre-dawn air carried September harvest coolness when I opened the door to the cellar stairs. Descending stone steps, James and I had laid ourselves 40 years ago. 2 hours of thinking clearly. I whispered to the oak-scented darkness. 2 hours before the next dose dulls everything again. The surveillance cameras in the main house would show an old woman struggling with insomnia, seeking comfort in her late husband's cellar. Grief made people predictable. They wouldn't question this. Deep in the barrel room, among the 2019 reserve rows, I found Leland Quincy working by lamplight. 70 years old and stooped from decades among oak barrels. He'd worked beside James building Stone Valley, from 12 barrels to 300. His weathered hands checked temperature gauges with the same precision I remembered from harvest seasons past. He glanced up at my approach, and his eyes told me he'd been counting the Betrayal as carefully as he counted bottles. "Mrs. Stone," his voice carried no surprise. "Didn't expect to see you down here so early." I let my words slur appropriately. "Couldn't sleep. Wanted to smell the oak. Reminds me of James." The barrel room smelled of aging Cabernet and vanilla tannins, scents that had meant home for 4 decades. Leland nodded slowly, reading between my careful words. "Your husband always said this cellar held our best work," he said. He was right about that. 35 years he'd worked this cellar. 35 years of loyalty to a family bleeding itself to death. And he'd noticed. I moved deeper into the rows, maintaining my shuffle past the reserves. Leland worked his way parallel to me, checking barrels with professional thoroughness. When we passed between the 2018 Cabernets, his weathered hand briefly clasped mine under pretense of steadying my balance. Inside the grip, a folded paper no larger than a receipt. His eyes met mine for 1 second, urgency and alliance compressed into a glance, before he moved on to the next barrel. "The 2018 Cabernets need monitoring," he said quietly. "Numbers don't match what we bottled." Numbers. He was giving me numbers. I palmed the note into my cardigan pocket, the paper feeling crisp against my fingers. My heart hammered, but I kept my face slack, confused. The performance I'd perfected over 8 months. "I'll have the quarterly inventory report ready for your son by Thursday," Leland said at normal volume. For any listening devices, neither of us could confirm or deny. Thursday, the contract deadline. I nodded vaguely and continued my slow shuffle toward the far wall, where the oldest barrels rested in shadow beyond the overhead light's reach, where no camera could see clearly. The note in my pocket weighed nothing, but felt heavy as a barrel full of proof. My hands trembled. Real trembling now, not performance, as I unfolded the paper against the stone wall. Leland's meticulous handwriting filled the small space. Shipment number 47-B5, 200 bottles, logged quality control loss, 0 actually destroyed. Shipment number 51-A, 4,800 bottles, missing post-bottling. Paperwork shows warehouse transfer that never occurred. Shipment number 53-C, 5,000 bottles, unaccounted between production and distribution records. At the bottom, underlined twice, October discrepancy total, $37,000, unaccounted revenue. 15,000 bottles, gone. Sold somewhere off the books while Malcolm doctored the paperwork and fed me sedatives to keep me from noticing that our production numbers and our sales revenue no longer matched. I pressed the note against my chest, feeling the evidence crinkle against my ribs. October alone, 1 month. How many months had I been too drugged to see the pattern? How much had they already stolen while I swallowed bitter wine and smiled? like a grateful patient. By midday, I understood the theft extended beyond wine and paperwork into my own bloodstream. The medical clinic's fluorescent lights hummed the same pitch they had for 8 months of checkups. But this time, I knew to listen for what the doctor wouldn't say to my face. Lori guided me through the pale waiting room with practiced solicitousness, her hand gentle on my wheelchair as she checked in with the receptionist. The morning pills had dulled my sharpness slightly, just enough to make the performance easier, not enough to miss details. "Monthly checkup for Carolyn Stone," Lori said. "Dr. Harrison is expecting us." "How is she doing?" The receptionist's voice carried practiced sympathy. "Any improvements?" Lori sighed beautifully. "We take it day by day. At least she's stable." Stable, like a horse that's been properly broken. I sat hunched in the wheelchair, staring vacantly at a poster about heart disease, while other patients glanced my way with pity. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and old magazines, familiar as the lie I'd been living. Dr. Harrison, the family physician who'd managed my supposed stroke recovery for 8 months, had the bedside manner of someone who'd stopped seeing patients as people and started seeing them as renewable income. He performed cursory vital checks while making reassuring sounds, positioning me in the examination chair, facing away from his desk where Lori sat. Standard arrangement. Privacy to discuss my prognosis without distressing the patient. They didn't realize my hearing worked perfectly despite the tremor and vacant stare. "Blood pressure stable at 118/76, Dr. Harrison said, removing the cuff from my arm. "Pulse normal. Physically, she's quite healthy for 65. "That's good." Lori shifted in her chair behind me. "But mentally, we're still seeing those episodes of agitation in the evenings." Episodes of agitation. They meant the moments when the sedative wore thin and I remembered who I was. How much does a medical degree cost when you're willing to sell it for whatever Malcolm pays per prescription? The same dosage. Dr. Harrison's voice carried no concern, just administrative efficiency. Lori leaned forward. I couldn't see her face, but I heard the careful calculation in her voice. "Could we increase the evening dose? She was particularly restless last night." And with the upcoming transition, not sale. The same careful language Malcolm used. The sale of the Vineyard, yes. Paper rustled as Dr. Harrison reached for his prescription pad without examining charts, without running tests, without asking a single diagnostic question. "Stressful time for the family. I'll up the prescription to 15 milligrams. My fingers tightened on the wheelchair armrests, subtle enough that neither of them noticed. "No test needed," Lori asked. "I just want to be safe." Given her consistent response to the current regimen, increasing the dosage is standard protocol for managing anxiety in stroke patients approaching major life changes. Standard protocol, medical jargon wrapped around malpractice like gift paper on poison. 15 milligrams, up from 10. 50% more fog between me and the truth they're stealing. The examination room's fluorescent buzz filled my ears as Dr. Harrison's pen scratched across the prescription pad. No examination, no blood work, no evaluation of whether the patient actually needed heavier sedation or just needed to stay quiet through contract signing. "This should help her rest more peacefully," he said, handing the prescription to Lori with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Thank you, doctor. Malcolm will be so relieved." Malcolm. Always Malcolm. The architect of this whole performance. I sat in the wheelchair staring at the blood pressure poster while they discussed me like furniture being moved to storage. Leland's note crinkled in my pocket. 15,000 bottles stolen. And now, this prescription joining the theft, keeping me chemically compliant while they dismantled everything James and I built. 4 days until the contract deadline. 4 days to sign away my vineyard while sedated past the point of legal consent. That night, they tried to erase me more completely than ever before. The new 15 milligram dose hit harder than 8 months of 10.
Dragging me toward darkness at 9:30 instead of 11.
But I wedged my eyes open and counted ceiling beams to stay conscious. 16 oak beams James installed himself when we built the master bedroom addition. I forced myself to trace each one with my eyes, fighting the chemical tide pulling me under. The fog wanted me gone. Lori had counted on me being unconscious by now, safely sedated while they finalized whatever Thursday's paperwork would demand. To disappoint her, I dug my fingernails into my palms, using pain to anchor myself to wakefulness. The bedroom smelled faintly of lavender from the sheets Lori changed that morning, her performance of devoted care extending to laundry detergent. Through my window, September stars scattered across black sky above the Vineyard rose. Stay awake. Count your breaths. 1, 2, 3. The sedative made everything soft-edged and distant, like watching life through gauze. My limbs felt heavy as oak barrels, my thoughts moving like cold honey. But I held on to consciousness with pure, stubborn will. The same determination that had built this vineyard from bare dirt 40 years ago. At 10:15, a sound penetrated the chemical haze. Malcolm's voice from the guest room adjacent to mine, muffled but urgent through the shared wall. He was supposed to be in the cottage with Lori, but he'd come back to the main house alone. His voice carried a tone I'd never heard in 8 months of his careful performance. Raw fear, stripped of all composure. "I understand the terms," he said, hushed but sharp. I've always understood the terms. Silence. Someone speaking on the other end of the phone. "Friday, yes, the sale closes Friday morning, and you'll have every dollar." Friday, 4 days. The contract deadline wasn't arbitrary. It was when his creditors came calling. Terror sounds different through walls. It's higher-pitched than authority, thinner than confidence. My son was terrified. I pressed my ear against the cool plaster, forcing my drugged mind to focus. Every word mattered. "The offshore accounts are empty." His voice broke slightly, rebuilding into desperate steadiness. "The hedge fund collapsed in March. I've given you everything I had left." Malcolm's careful business vocabulary was breaking down into pleading. The composure he'd maintained for 8 months, the concerned son, the responsible executor of his declining mother's affairs, had crumbled into something naked and afraid. "You'll get the $42 million from the Vineyard sale. Please, I just need until Friday." $42 million, the Vineyard's true value. Not the undervalued price Fletcher had warned me about. Malcolm was promising someone the full worth, which meant he'd negotiated a separate deal. Leland's missing inventory. The altered financial records. All of it feeding debts I'd never known existed. Which is worse, a son who steals from greed, or one who steals from fear and still chooses his own survival over your freedom? Then his voice cracked completely, barely audible through the wall.
I can't lose this vineyard.
"You understand. It's all I have left to give you." The words settled into my sedative-fogged brain with perfect, terrible clarity. Malcolm wasn't the calculating mastermind I'd imagined. He was a desperate debtor being controlled by creditors who didn't negotiate. The hedge fund collapse, the offshore gambling, the empty accounts. He'd already lost everything, and now owed people who expected payment regardless of family loyalty or legal niceties. The phone call ended with a soft click, followed by silence heavier than sound. I lay in the darkness, fighting unconsciousness, holding one thought clear through the chemical fog. Desperate men don't leave witnesses. When everything falls apart, Malcolm needed that sale to close Friday.
Needed me compliant and sedated and legally incompetent to sign whatever documents his creditors demanded. And if I woke up after the signing and started asking questions, I became a problem he couldn't afford. I hadn't slept. Malcolm's phone call still echoed through my skull. $42 million. Creditors. Friday deadline. The numbers swirled behind my closed eyelids until dawn broke across the valley in shades of gold that felt like mockery. Hadley Stone, my 16-year-old granddaughter, walked into the office at 9 o'clock Saturday morning with a laptop and the bright energy of someone who still believed family. Businesses were built on trust instead of theft. She had her father's dark hair, but my mother's green eyes. And she'd been helping with weekend inventory counts since she turned 14. "Grandma, I found something weird in the shipping logs." I set down my coffee. "Show me." She opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with the casual confidence of her generation. I was cross-referencing October outbound shipments against the sales database, and there's this manifest that doesn't match anything in our customer orders. The document filled her screen. Oakland warehouse, quality inspection, 300 bottles. My hands went cold. These vintage codes, Hadley said, tapping the screen. SV-CAB-1987-R and SV-CAB-1992-R. Those are reserve designations, right? We don't send reserves for quality inspection. They're already. Those are yours, I said quietly. She blinked. What? Your inheritance trust. Your grandfather and I set it aside before you were born. The 1987 vintage from the year we broke ground on the new facility. The 1992 from the year your father graduated college. I touched the screen, my finger trembling against the clinical shipping codes that reduced 40 years of family legacy to inventory line items. 300 bottles, authenticated, insured for $23,000 per case. Hadley's face went pale. That's over $300,000. $345,000 to be exact. But I'd learned precision wasn't always kindness. How do you tell your granddaughter her father is selling her birthright to cover gambling debts? How do you explain that the man who taught her to read wine labels is liquidating her future, bottle by bottle? When was this shipped? I kept my voice steady, channeling 30 years of boardroom composure into a conversation that was ripping my heart apart. October 28th, 2 weeks ago. She scrolled down. There's a notation here. Hold for third-party authentication. Release pending November 22nd, wire transfer confirmation. Friday. The same Friday, Malcolm's creditors expected their $42 million. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was looting his own daughter's trust fund, selling off the vintages her grandfather and I had carefully preserved through economic downturns and drought years and every crisis that threatened our family's legacy. Those bottles represented more than money. They were history, identity, promise. Hadley was watching me with those two perceptive green eyes. Dad authorized the shipment, didn't he? I could have lied. Should have, probably. Protected her innocence for another few hours, another few days. But she deserved the truth, even if the truth was a knife. Yes. Why would he? She stopped. Understanding dawned across her face like a storm front, darkening everything it touched. He's in trouble. Yes. Bad trouble. I reached across the desk and took her hand. Her fingers felt small and cold, and I remembered holding them when she was 3 years old, teaching her to deadhead the roses in the garden her grandfather planted. How bad? She whispered. Outside the window, workers moved through the vineyard rows, pruning and checking irrigation lines. Normal Saturday work. Normal autumn rhythms. Everything normal, except the family dissolving around us like sugar in acid. I had decisions to make. Fletcher Norwood, the appraiser who'd warned me about the $15 million undervaluation. Leland Quincy, who documented the missing bottles. My attorneys in San Francisco, who specialized in fraud cases. Or should I confront Malcolm directly? Show him I knew about the creditors and the offshore accounts, and now his daughter's inheritance. But first, I had to answer Hadley's question. Bad enough that we need to be very, very careful, I said. And smart. She squeezed my hand. What do we do? That small word we felt like revolution. I sent Hadley home at noon with instructions to act normal, tell no one. By midnight, the house had gone silent. I lit a single candle and spread every piece of evidence across my bedroom floor. Leland's note documenting 15,000 missing bottles and 37,000 unaccounted in October. Hadley's manifest showing 300 bottles of her inheritance shipped to Oakland. Release pending Friday. The financial forms with revenue altered from over $1 million to $847,000. Fletcher Norwood's business card, his warning about $15 million in undervaluation still echoing. Separate, each could be explained away. Together in candlelight, they formed a pattern so precise it could have been blueprinted. My hands moved across documents with muscle memory I hadn't accessed in 8 months. Cross-reference shipments against bank statements. Compare sales records to Malcolm's reports. Map discrepancies to medication timeline. The CFO training I'd spent 40 years building, catching contractor fraud, auditing billings, constructing disputed books, emerged from beneath sedative fog like bone through shallow water. March. Malcolm's hedge fund collapsed. Offshore accounts emptied. 42 million in creditor debt created. April. 8 months ago. My stroke diagnosis. Same week the supplement protocol began. Same week, according to Leland's notes, irregular shipments started appearing in outbound logs. May through October. Steady liquidation, inventory disappearing, revenue doctored. Share transfers prepared for foreign conglomerate signature. Friday, November 22nd. 3 days from now. Creditors expect payment. Fraudulent sale closes. Hadley's inheritance liquidates. 8 months of scattered puzzle pieces suddenly formed a picture so clear it could have been a photograph my son had orchestrated my incapacitation. Not coincidence. Design. They needed me incapacitated, but alive. Dead would trigger probate and the original will James and I structured to protect the business. Incompetent let Malcolm control everything through medical proxy, while keeping legal ownership technically mine. The bitterness in my nightly wine wasn't accident. It was systematic drugging with physician cooperation and a deadline. I sat back, candle wax pooling on the nightstand, and let cold recognition settle. The man I'd raised, taught to read balance sheets, walked through his first interview, had spent 8 months chemically erasing his own mother to cover gambling debts. Professional betrayal. I understood greed, desperation, opportunity, had clean motives, but this was intimate. He'd watched me shuffle and slur and spill for 243 evenings, knowing every tremor was manufactured. My bedroom smelled like vanilla wax and old paper. Outside, November wind moved through bare vines with a sound like warnings I should have heard months ago. I opened the nightstand drawer. James's fountain pen lay in velvet case, the Mont Blanc he'd used to sign our first bank loan for 12 acres and a dream. I lifted it, felt cool weight in my palm. He'd taught me to read contractor billings, catch false invoices, reconstruct financial truth from deliberately obscured records. The pen felt heavier than memory. James had signed our first loan with this pen, hand shaking with hope. Now I'd use it to save what we built from the son we made. I pulled a blank legal pad from the drawer and smoothed it flat. 3 days until Friday. 3 days to reconstruct 8 months of hidden transactions, prove fraud. Find leverage strong enough to stop a desperate man from burning everything. The first entry I wrote was simple. Actual Vineyard value per independent appraisal, $42 million. Proposed sale price, $27 million. Difference to investigate, $15 million. I looked at my handwriting, steady, clear, no tremor, and whispered into candlelit silence, "If you want to play with ledgers, Malcolm, I'll show you who the real accountant is." The CFO was back. By dawn, I'd have my first ally on the phone. Dawn broke at 5:45. I'd spent 4 hours reconstructing fraud, and now I needed to know if I still legally existed. I shuffled toward the Vineyard's eastern edge, carrying the prepaid phone hidden in James's old tackle box for emergencies we'd never imagined would involve our son. Mist hung low between grape rows. Main house cameras covered cellars and offices, but James designed blind spots for privacy during competitor visits. Malcolm would see confused, wondering if he checked footage, exactly what they expected. The eastern perimeter opened onto Cabernet acres, heavy clusters nearing final maturation. I stopped where property line met Oak Grove and dialed the number I'd memorized 30 years ago. Dalton Whitfield, the 52-year-old estate attorney who drafted James's and my will 3 decades earlier, answered his home line on the 3rd ring. Whitfield. Dalton, it's Carolyn Stone. I need to know if I still legally own my vineyard. Silence. Sharp intake of breath. Carolyn, your voice is clear. Clear enough to ask if the will James and I signed still protects me from my son. Careful weight entered his tone. The original document stands. You retain final decision authority unless a court formally declares you legally incompetent. That hasn't occurred. Relief hit like warm water after freezing cold. Yet, he agreed quietly. A mourning dove called from oak branches. Across the valley, a tractor started for Sunday morning work. Normal sounds beneath extraordinary conversation. How long have you known, I asked, that Malcolm was maneuvering? 6 months. That you might not be truly incapacitated, he hesitated. I hoped. Your signatures on documents his attorney filed showed tremor inconsistencies. Some genuinely impaired, others practiced. 20 years trusting Dalton to protect our estate. And his voice still carried the careful precision James valued when we'd built this place from 12 acres. How much time do I have? His exhale crackled. I've been monitoring county court filings. Malcolm's attorney requested emergency session slots for early this week. My hand tightened. Emergency incapacity petition. Yes, filed and temporarily approved. It transfers authority to your medical proxy immediately, pending full hearing. That proxy is Malcolm. Through healthcare power of attorney I signed 8 months ago. Correct. Once the petition gets preliminary approval, maybe 48 hours, you lose legal standing even if lucid. Burden shifts. You'd have to prove competence in formal hearing, while Malcolm controls everything. Days. Not the 3 I'd counted to contract deadline. Days before the petition erased me legally. When does he file? Based on session timing and Friday's closing, probably Tuesday, Wednesday latest, to ensure approval before the sale. That gives you 72 hours, maybe less, to establish documented evidence of competence and fraud before the petition makes you legally powerless. Morning sun broke through mist, turning grape leaves gold. James had planted these vines 40 years ago, teaching me soil pH and brix levels and the 1,000 details separating honest viticulture from corporate manufacturing. Our son was selling them for gambling debts, and I had 3 days to prove I could stop him. If you're going to fight this, Carolyn, Dalton said quietly, you need evidence documented and filed before Malcolm's petition hits the judge's desk, probably by Wednesday. Can you do that in 72 hours? I looked toward the main house. Through the cottage window, Malcolm sat reviewing paperwork that would steal everything. I'm going to find out, I told Dalton, and ended the call before he could hear the tremor in my voice that wasn't performance anymore. By midday, I'd have physical proof Malcolm couldn't explain away. Malcolm and Laurie left at 11:30, her voice bright through my bedroom door, about some emergency at the bottling facility. I waited 5 minutes, listening to their car fade down the gravel drive before moving. The operations office door was unlocked. Malcolm never leaves it unlocked. I've watched him check the handle twice on his way out every single day for 40 years. But this morning, confident or careless, he forgot. That miscalculation might be the only advantage I had left. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. Leather and old paper. Malcolm's desk chair, the same one James used, still smelled faintly of the saddle soap I'd applied every spring. Dust motes hung in November sunlight, slanting through the east window. The cold brass doorknob felt like commitment against my palm. I had maybe an hour, maybe less if the emergency was fabricated. His desk was obsessively organized, pens aligned like soldiers, inbox sorted by color-coded priority tags. Even Laurie's framed photo positioned at exactly 90 degrees to the desk edge. When did my son become this person? The boy who'd left muddy boots on my kitchen floor wouldn't recognize this sterile precision. Top drawer invoices, receipts, shipping manifests, all routine. Second drawer, employee timesheets, tax forms, insurance paperwork. Nothing incriminating. The filing cabinet stood against the north wall. 4 drawers of alphabetized business records I'd helped organize when we built this office 30 years ago. I pulled the top drawer. Current contracts. Second drawer, vendor agreements. Third drawer, personnel files. And behind them, tucked vertical between the cabinet back and the hanging folders, a manila folder with no tab label. My pulse hammered in my ears. Outside, a truck rumbled past toward the fermentation building. I froze, listening, but the engine faded. I pulled the folder free. Malcolm's cologne lingered on the manila surface, that expensive sandalwood he'd started wearing after the promotion. Confidential, legal, in his handwriting across the front. Inside a single document on county court letterhead, emergency declaration of incapacity, pre-filled with my name, birth date, address, medical justification section already completed in clinical language. Progressive cognitive decline, diminished executive function, unsafe medication management, requires immediate protective intervention. Filing date stamped in red, Wednesday, November 20th, 2 days from now. Checkbox marked, immediate temporary conservatorship pending evaluation. And at the bottom, a signature line, pre-printed with Harrison, M.D., Napa Medical Group, typed below it. The physician Malcolm had introduced for routine geriatric assessments, who'd prescribed the sedatives, who'd increased dosage without examination, based solely on Laurie's request. He hadn't been incompetent or negligent. He'd been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. I taught Malcolm to read in this vineyard, sounding out words on barrel labels while James pruned the Cabernet blocks. Integrity, he'd repeated, tracing the letters on our original label design. What's that mean, Mom? Now I was searching his office for evidence he'd abandoned the answer. The paper trembled in my hands as I pulled out my phone and photographed the document. Every angle, every detail. The red filing stamp. Harrison's pre-printed name. The checkbox authorizing immediate authority transfer. This was proof. Dalton could file it with the court. Stop the petition before Wednesday. I started to return the folder to its hiding place behind the personnel files. But as I slid it back, my fingers brushed another folder, tucked even deeper against the cabinet rear. I pulled it out. Post-filing facility options in Laurie's neat handwriting. Inside, glossy brochures. The first one showed a sprawling Spanish-style building surrounded by manicured lawns and walking paths. Meadowbrook Memory Care, specialized long-term residential services. The address at the bottom, Bakersfield, California, 200 miles south of Napa Valley. They weren't just planning to take the vineyard, they were planning to erase me from the valley entirely. I drove north toward St. Helena. The Meadowbrook brochure image burned into my mind. 200 miles from everything I'd built. 200 miles from the valley James and I had planted, vine by vine. I parked 3 blocks from the electronics store and walked the rest. Like a woman who has something to hide. Cool November afternoon, sun slanting low through oak trees lining the commercial street. I'd chosen street. Helena deliberately far enough from Napa that no one would recognize supposedly incapacitated Carolyn Stone shopping for surveillance equipment on a Sunday. The store smelled like plastic and new carpet. A young man looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you find something?" "I need something discreet for voice recording," I said, keeping my voice clear and professional. "I'm told the newer devices are quite small." Marcus Holbrook, his name tag said, was younger than Malcolm, but had the same patient professionalism that used to make me proud of my son. He gestured toward a display case. "We have several options. Are you looking for meetings, interviews, or personal dictation?" "Personal documentation. Very personal." If he thought that was odd, his expression didn't show it. He pulled out a tray of devices disguised as ordinary objects. Pens, USB drives, keychains. These are voice-activated. This pen model holds up to 20 hours. The USB looks like storage, but records when you press the logo. And this, he held up what appeared to be an ordinary silver wristwatch, activates with a double tap. 8 hours battery, stores 30 hours of audio. I took the watch. Cool metal, lighter than I expected. And it looks like something I'd actually wear. My grandmother has the same one. She uses it for birdwatching notes. When did buying a watch become an act of war against your own child? "I'll take it." I pointed to a small silver brooch in the display case, designed like a grape cluster. "And that?" "Camera brooch, video and audio, 4-hour battery, records to internal SD card." "Perfect." He rang them up without questions, showed me how to activate each device, explained the simple file transfer process. The entire transaction took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to purchase the tools I'd need to prove my son was trying to erase me. In my car, parked in the far corner of the lot where no one would notice, I fastened the watch around my left wrist and double-tapped the face. A tiny red light blinked once, then disappeared. Testing. Sunday, 4:15 p.m., I said quietly. My name is Carolyn Stone, and I built Stone Valley Vineyards with my late husband, James. The words felt strange in the silence of the car, speaking them aloud to no one, creating a record for someone who might need to prove I existed. For the record, I am not incompetent, I am not confused, and I am not going quietly. I tapped the watch again. The recording stopped. Following Marcus's instructions, I played it back through my phone. My voice came through clear and steady. Nothing like the slurred confusion I'd performed for 8 months. The brooch camera sat in its velvet box on the passenger seat, like a tiny weapon I never wanted to carry. But Wednesday was 2 days away, Malcolm's filing deadline. The moment the petition hit the judge's desk, temporary conservatorship would transfer everything to my son, while I waited months for a competency hearing I might never win. I needed evidence before then, not just the photographs of his filing documents. I needed Malcolm and Laurie to say the quiet parts out loud on the record, which meant orchestrating confrontations in the next 48 hours, which meant family dinner tonight, wearing this watch, steering conversation toward the sale deadline and my future at the Vineyard, hoping they'd reveal details their lawyers would never want recorded. I started the car and headed back toward Napa, the watch light against my wrist, but heavier with purpose than 8 months of pretending had ever been. Tonight's family dinner might be my only chance to get them talking. Dinner was set for 6. I arrived wearing the grape cluster brooch pinned to my cardigan, its tiny camera lens invisible among the silver leaves. I sat across from Malcolm and Laurie at the dining table and double-tapped the brooch as I reached for the water pitcher. The device activated with a click only I could hear. Roasted chicken, green beans, rosemary potatoes. Sunday dinner ritual we'd maintained for 40 years. Laurie served plates with practiced efficiency, while Malcolm poured wine into 3 glasses. The Cabernet block is looking strong this year, I said, my voice carrying the slight vagueness they expected. James would have been proud. Malcolm nodded. We're projected for excellent yields across all varietals. The new irrigation system is performing better than anticipated. Assuming we're still here to harvest them, Laurie added, glancing at Malcolm. I cut my chicken into small pieces, focusing on the mechanical task. What happens after the sale? Where will I live? Malcolm's fork paused halfway to his mouth. We'll discuss your living arrangements after the transition. Mom? After the transition, not after the sale. As if the business changing hands was simply management shifting, not my ownership being stripped away. But I'd like to know now, will I stay in the cottage or move to the main house? You'll be taken care of, Laurie said quickly. That's what matters. The roasted chicken tastes like sawdust, but I chew and swallow and smile like a woman who doesn't know she's being erased. And the buyer, I continued, voice careful and confused. What are their plans for the vineyard? Will they keep the staff? Leland has been with us for 35 years. Malcolm set his wine glass down with controlled precision. The conglomerate has assured us they'll maintain operations with minimal disruption. That's generous of them, to pay what the vineyard is worth and keep everyone employed. Very generous, Laurie agreed. She was relaxing now, my questions seeming harmless. The buyer is being very reasonable. $27 million for a property this size is actually quite generous in the current market. The number hung in the air like smoke. Malcolm's head snapped toward Laurie. Laurie, we discussed not sharing specific numbers. 27 million. 15 million below the fair value Fletcher had whispered about in the wine cellar. $15 million just vanishing. I made pie, Laurie said suddenly, standing so fast her chair scraped against hardwood. Let me get the pie. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Malcolm and me across the table in silence heavy as fog. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Calculating. Assessing whether his supposedly incapacitated mother had understood what just happened. I blinked slowly, let my gaze drift toward the window. Pie sounds lovely. What kind? Apple, he said quietly, but his eyes never left my face. Outside, November darkness had settled over the vineyard. The window reflected the three of us in the dining room. Malcolm studying me, Laurie returning with dessert plates. Me looking vague and harmless, with a silver brooch on my cardigan, recording every word. Laurie served pie with trembling hands. The conversation shifted to safe territory. Hadley's college applications, the upcoming Thanksgiving Vineyard tour, the weather forecast for the week. But Malcolm's look across the table was a frozen wine in the barrel. I have the number on tape now. Proof of the undervaluation. Proof they both knew they were defrauding me of $15 million and needed to keep it hidden. The question is whether he'll move up his timeline now that Laurie slipped. I spent Sunday night reviewing the recordings, Laurie's admission playing on repeat. Monday morning I headed toward the wine cellar to find Leland. Malcolm's voice stopped me halfway down the exterior stairs, low and sharp, carrying through the partially open cellar door. I froze, pressing against the cool stone wall where I could hear without being seen. I don't know what you think you're accomplishing by talking to my mother about vineyard valuations. Leland's reply came quieter, measured. She asked me a direct question about market conditions. I answered honestly. Your honesty is going to cost you this job if you keep interfering in family business. I edged closer to the gap in the door. Malcolm had Leland backed against the barrel racks, his body language aggressive in a way I'd never seen directed at staff. The cellar stretched behind them, row after row of aging Cabernet and French oak, decades of accumulated work. I'm not interfering, I'm doing my job. Your job is inventory management, not consulting with my mother about appraisal values and market pricing. She's asking questions she wouldn't know to ask on her own. Someone's coaching her. Leland's shoulders squared slightly. Your mother built this vineyard. She knows more than you think. After Wednesday, what she knows won't matter anymore. The wine cellar has always been the heart of this vineyard. Now my son is using it to threaten the people who keep that heart beating. Wednesday. The incapacity filing deadline. Spoken aloud like a fact, like something already decided and unstoppable. 2 days from now. 48 hours before the petition erased my legal existence. I need you to stop talking to her about business matters, Malcolm continued. No more questions about appraisals, sales, finances, staffing, nothing. She's not competent to understand it anyway. She seems perfectly competent to me. Malcolm's voice dropped to something colder. That's not what her physician says, or what the county court will say. I'm trying to do this cleanly, Leland. Don't make it messy. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I work for Stone Valley Vineyards, Leland said quietly. I answer to the owner, singular. The word landed like a stone in still water. How many people will Malcolm destroy to take what he wants? Malcolm stepped closer. Close enough that Leland had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. That's about to change. Consider this your only warning. Understood. Malcolm turned toward the door. I pulled back into shadow, heart hammering. He emerged into morning sunlight, phone already in his hand, and climbed the stairs within 3 feet of where I stood, motionless. His cologne, that expensive sandalwood, washed over me as he passed. It's me, he said into the phone, voice still carrying that cold edge. We need to move the Wednesday filing to tomorrow. She's asking too many questions. Tomorrow, Tuesday, not 2 days, 24 hours. I waited until his footsteps faded toward the main house before I moved. Through the gap in the cellar door, I could see Leland still standing by the barrel racks, hands clenched at his sides. He looked up, met my eyes through the opening, and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Still on your side. But the deadline had just collapsed from 2 days to 1, and I had no idea if what I'd gathered was enough. I called Fletcher from the cottage as soon as Malcolm was out of sight. I need to meet you, today, now. He named a coffee shop in St. Helena. 30 minutes. Fletcher Norwood was already waiting at the corner table when I arrived, his back to the wall, like a man who expects trouble. I slid into the seat across from him. Malcolm moved the incapacity filing to tomorrow. I have less than 24 hours. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Tomorrow? I thought you had until Wednesday. Laurie mentioned the sale price at dinner. He knows I'm asking questions. The timeline accelerated. Fletcher set his cup down carefully. What do you need? Professional documentation of the fraud. I have recordings, photographs, but I need expert testimony that holds up in court. Can you prepare an emergency appraisal showing the undervaluation? In less than a day, he pulled out his phone, started typing. It won't be comprehensive, but I can document preliminary findings with enough detail to stop an emergency petition. I'd need Malcolm's contract details. I sent him the photographs from Malcolm's office. The signature page, terms sheet, buyer identification showing Stella Holdings International, LLC. Fletcher studied the images, his expression shifting to something sharper. Stella Holdings. I've seen that name in acquisition databases. Is that significant? Shell companies often use constellation names, Stella, Nova, Orbit, Pinnacle, despite to sound established while hiding the real buyer. He zoomed in on the corporate structure. Give me 6 hours. I can trace the ownership chain and determine who's actually behind this purchase. How did it come to this? Hiring investigators to prove my own son is a thief. The offer structure alone might tell us who's really buying, Fletcher continued, and at what markup they plan to resell. If Stella is a shell, someone local might be using it to acquire your property at depressed prices. Someone Malcolm knows personally, possibly, or someone Malcolm is working with. The coffee shop smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, espresso machines hissing, quiet Monday conversations surrounding us. We could have been discussing harvest projections. Instead, I was plotting evidence to stop my son from erasing me. I can have preliminary documentation by 8 p.m. tonight, Fletcher said. Emergency findings citing professional concern about transaction irregularities. That I can deliver. You're risking your reputation doing this on such short notice. His expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. Some things matter more than reputation. The coffee tastes like ash, but I drink it anyway because I need to look normal, capable, competent for what comes tomorrow. I'll send findings to your personal email by 8, he said. Don't open them on Vineyard property. Malcolm might be monitoring your accounts. He thinks I can barely operate a remote control. Good. Keep him thinking that. Fletcher stood, gathering his jacket. Carolyn, if this goes to court, you need to understand what you're asking. Formal fraud allegations against your son. Public record. Criminal implications if evidence is strong enough. I understand. Do you? Because once I file professional concerns with the county assessor's office, there's no taking it back. I met his eyes. Malcolm is stealing my vineyard and planning to lock me in a memory care facility 200 miles from home. I understand exactly what I'm asking for. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. 8 p.m. Check your email. I watched him walk to his car through the window, then drove back toward the vineyard with hope beating against panic. What? I didn't see Fletcher standing by his car, phone to his ear, jaw tightening with each sentence of a brief conversation, or the way he stared at the contract photo I'd sent, his finger hovering over a name buried in the corporate structure I hadn't noticed. Someone else already knew about the fraud, and Fletcher just confirmed it. I drove back from St. Helena with hope and dread balanced on a knife edge. Fletcher would deliver by 8 p.m. 12 hours until Malcolm filed the petition. Laurie Stone was in my bedroom closet when I walked through the cottage door, and she didn't hear me coming. The front entry was silent, except for movement upstairs. I climbed quietly, hand on the banister. My bedroom door stood open. Through the gap, I could see Laurie's back, her hands moving through shelves above my hanging clothes. Looking for something. Laurie. She spun, hand to chest. Carolyn, I didn't hear you come in. I was just checking if you needed any heavier winter things brought down. The weather report says freezing temperatures this week. I walked into my bedroom, slow and careful, and that requires going through my purse. My handbag sat open on the bed, contents scattered, wallet, checkbook. The prepaid phone was in my pocket, thank God. I was looking for your medication list, Laurie said, recovering. We've been worried about you keeping track of your pills, your documents. Malcolm thought I should check. She's searching my bedroom like a detective, but she's the criminal. Malcolm sent you to search my bedroom. Not search. Help. We're trying to help you, Carolyn. She gathered my things back into the purse with brisk efficiency. You've been so confused lately. Forgetting conversations, asking the same questions repeatedly. "We just want to make sure you're safe." I let my expression cloud with uncertainty. "I don't remember asking questions repeatedly." "See, that's exactly what we're concerned about." She touched my arm with practiced sympathy. "Tomorrow's appointment with Dr. Harrison will help clarify things." Tomorrow's appointment, the incapacity filing. Laurie knew the timeline, knew the plan, was actively coordinating it. "What time is the appointment?" "Malcolm will let you know. Don't worry about details." She smiled and moved toward the door. "I'll let you rest." "You must be tired from your drive." "I was only gone an hour." "Were you?" It felt longer. Her eyes held calculation beneath false concern. "Where did you go?" "Coffee, in Napa, the cafe on Main Street." "That's nice, but maybe tomorrow you should stay close to home. Rest before your appointment." She left. Footsteps descending, front door closing with careful quietness. How long have they been coming into my home when I'm not here? I waited 5 minutes, listening. Then I knelt beside my bed and pried up the loose floorboard James had installed 40 years ago for document storage. The recording watch and brooch camera lay wrapped in velvet, untouched. The USB drive with photocopies, Leland's handwritten note. The prepaid phone backup. "Still here," I whispered. "Still safe. Still mine." But as I replaced the board, something caught my eye. My pill organizer on the nightstand, 7-day plastic case with morning and evening compartments, sat at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. And on the clear plastic lid, a faint rectangular glare showed where phone camera flash had reflected. Laurie had photographed my medications, building her own evidence file to support tomorrow's petition. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Email notification. Fletcher's name. Subject line, urgent. Buyer identity confirmed. You need to see this tonight. 3 hours early. I moved to the window to check if the coast was clear and froze. Laurie stood on the Vineyard path 30 yards away, phone to her ear, facing directly toward my cottage door, watching, waiting, making sure I didn't leave again. Whatever Fletcher found was urgent enough to send early, and Laurie was making sure I stayed trapped on the property until tomorrow's filing erased my legal existence. I watched Laurie through the window for 20 minutes until she finally walked back toward the main house. Twilight was settling when my granddaughter Hadley slipped through the cottage door without knocking, her face pale in the fading light. "Grandma, they moved the signing." She pulled out her phone, hands trembling. "It's not Friday anymore." Dad scheduled it for Wednesday at 9 a.m. Wednesday, 2 days from now, not 5. I took her phone and read the forwarded email. Contract execution rescheduled per principal request. Wednesday, November 22nd, 9 a.m. Stellar Holdings representatives confirmed. "He's panicking," I said quietly. Laurie's slip at Sunday dinner made him move up everything. Hadley's hands shake as she shows me the email. And I realize my granddaughter has been carrying this fear alone, trying to protect me from her own father. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "You seem different than you did Saturday." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in 8 months. You're not confused anymore." I never was. Understanding dawned across her face, followed by something between relief and horror. "You've been pretending." "Yes. For how long?" "Long enough to gather evidence." I handed back her phone. "You need to go before your father notices you're here. Act normal. 2 more days." What happens in 2 days? Either I save the Vineyard or Malcolm takes it. But I need you safe either way. I touched her cheek. "Thank you for bringing me this." She left through the back door, disappearing into November dusk. I locked the cottage and opened Fletcher's email. The report was 12 pages, but the summary told me everything. Stellar Holdings International, LLC traces through 3 shell companies to Riverside Estate Group, registered Napa Valley, California. Principal owner Marcus Dahlberg. Cross-reference shows Dahlberg and Malcolm Stone established formal business partnership March 2024. Transaction structure suggests planned acquisition at $27 million with immediate resale at appraised market value $42 million. Profit margin $15 million. Presumed split between parties. Malcolm's business partner, not a foreign conglomerate. Someone right here in Napa Valley, someone Malcolm had coordinated with for over a year. Platform to steal my vineyard and flip it for millions. I pulled out James's fountain pen and wrote the timeline. Tuesday, Malcolm files incapacity petition. Dalton files emergency counterpetition exposing fraud. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Signing ceremony. I attend. Appear cooperative. Sign with my invalid signature variant, the one using my maiden name middle initial, instead of my legal married signature. Contract void even if executed. Recording devices capture Malcolm's statements. Fletcher's appraisal delivered to County Assessor Tuesday night. Wednesday afternoon, Dalton presents recordings, photographs, expert testimony to block incapacity claim. The evidence spreads across my bed like chess pieces, in endgame position, every move planned, every sacrifice calculated. Malcolm taught me chess on this vineyard when he was 12, patient afternoons explaining strategy and sacrifice. He should have remembered one thing: I never resign until checkmate. I gathered everything: recordings, photographs, Fletcher's report, Leland's notes, Hadley's manifest, all documented, dated, provable. The bedside candle James gave me on our 40th anniversary flickered in the draft. Beyond the window, the vineyard stretched invisible in darkness, but I knew every vine, every barrel, every inch of soil Malcolm thought he'd already taken. I blew out the candle. 2 days. They think I'm surrendering. I'm just waiting for checkmate. Tuesday morning, I woke at dawn, dressed carefully, and rehearsed my lines. By 8 a.m., I was ready for the performance that would determine everything. I walk into the main house parlor, wearing exhaustion like a costume. Malcolm and Laurie look up from their coffee, not expecting me this early. I see calculation in Malcolm's eyes as I shuffle to the nearest chair and sink into it. I can't do this anymore, I say, voice breaking. The fighting, the questions, trying to understand everything. You're right, I'm too tired to manage the vineyard. Laurie's hand moves to Malcolm's arm. He leans forward, expression carefully neutral. Mom, this is the right decision. You'll be taken care of. I know. I let my hands tremble as I fold them in my lap. I just want it to be over. I'll sign whatever you need tomorrow. The relief crossing Malcolm's face is genuine. That's good. We just need you to review the paperwork tonight, so tomorrow's signing goes smoothly. Will it be complicated? No, simple transfer documents. You sign, the buyers take possession. We set up your arrangements. He speaks slowly, like I'm a child. 9 a.m. tomorrow. My lawyer will witness. What exactly do I need to sign? Malcolm pulls a folder from the side table and opens it to a deed copy. Just your signature, as it appears on the original deed. Your legal name on all vineyard documents. He points to the typed name, Carolyn Elizabeth Stone. Carolyn Elizabeth Stone, he repeats. That's how you need to sign, exactly as it appears here. Malcolm watches me with something almost like relief, maybe even pity. And I let him see what he wants to see, a tired old woman finally accepting defeat. I remember my own name, Malcolm. Of course, I'm just making sure tomorrow goes smoothly. He closes the folder. The buyers are driving from San Francisco. We can't have complications. Laurie stands and moves to the writing desk by the window. Let's have you practice the signature so you feel confident tomorrow. Just a few times, so your hand remembers. She sets out blank sheets and a pen. I take the pen. My hand is steady. Too steady. I add a small tremor as I position the paper. Carolyn Stone. I write my first name clearly, then my last name. But I skip the distinctive middle initial flourish James taught me 40 years ago, the capital E with its unique upward stroke that marked every legal document I'd ever signed as co-owner. Without that flourish, the signature looks similar, but legally invalid. Each practice signature is a trap I'm setting on paper, invisible to everyone but me. Good, Laurie says. Again. I write it again. Carolyn Stone. No middle initial, no flourish. Legally void. One more time. Third signature. Same careful omission. Perfect. Carolyn. Laurie gathers the practice papers with satisfaction. Tomorrow will be easy. You'll sign just like this, and everything will be settled. Malcolm nods approval. See, you're doing fine. This is the right choice. I stand slowly, using the chair arm for support. I should rest before tomorrow. Good idea. Laurie files the practice signatures in her leather portfolio like trophies. We'll come get you at 8:45. I turn toward the parlor window and freeze. Dalton Whitfield's car is pulling into the Vineyard Drive. Our meeting was scheduled for noon, 4 hours from now. Malcolm follows my gaze. His expression shifts from satisfaction to suspicion. Why is your attorney here, Mom? I deflected Malcolm's question about Dalton with confusion estate documents. I didn't remember asking him to come. Dalton played along. Malcolm remained suspicious but distracted. By noon, I'd made my way to the wine cellar. Malcolm's voice echoes through the cellar office. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. I'm sitting at the cellar manager's desk reviewing barrel inventory when Malcolm delivers the blow. Leland stands by the French oak barrels, his weathered hands still holding the rotation schedule clipboard. Terminated. Leland's voice stays level. On what grounds? The new ownership structure requires management changes. You're being let go with 2 weeks severance. I've worked this vineyard for 35 years. You're firing me a day before the sale closes. Effective immediately, Leland. Leave your access cards and office keys with me before you go. The wine cellar smells like oak and aging Cabernet. Decades of careful work reduced to this cold dismissal. Leland has been here since the beginning, helped James plant the first vines, taught Malcolm how to taste for tannins, shows Hadley how to read barrel codes. Malcolm is systematically cutting me off from anyone who might help or witness tomorrow's signing. First isolating me chemically and legally, now eliminating every ally who could intervene. I'll get my things, Leland says quietly. He walks to the small desk in the corner where he's kept his personal items for 3 decades. A framed photo of his late wife. Coffee mug from the Harvest Festival. Notebook filled with tasting notes spanning decades. 15 years of loyalty dismissed in 90 seconds. This is what my son has become. Malcolm watches with crossed arms as Leland packs his belongings into a cardboard box. No thank you for decades of service. No acknowledgement of the man who saved harvests during droughts, who worked 16-hour days during crush season, who taught the next generation everything he knew. Keys and cards, as requested. Leland sets them on Malcolm's desk with precise care. The barrel rotation schedule is on the desk. October tastings are marked for quality control. You'll need to check the reserve Cabernet by Thursday. Your final check will be direct deposited Friday. I hope the vineyard survives what you're doing to it. Malcolm's jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Leland picks up his box and moves toward the exit. As he passes my desk, he sets down something small, an old brass keyring, unmarked. Clearly not part of the official keys, he just returned to Malcolm. Mrs. Stone, the old record you asked about last month. I remember where they are now. I blink slowly, playing confused. What old records? Just some barrel documentation from when we started. Nothing important. His eyes meet mine for half a second. The keys should still work. Archive vault, sublevel. Oh, thank you, Leland. How many people will Malcolm destroy to steal what was never his? Malcolm barely glances at the exchange, already checking his phone for messages about tomorrow's contract logistics. Leland walks out of the cellar he's tended for 35 years without looking back. After Malcolm leaves to meet with his lawyer, I examine the brass keyring. 3 keys, different sizes, heavily tarnished with age. Faded ink labels in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. James's careful block letters from 40 years ago. Archive vault, cellar, sublevel. The vault wasn't just sealed, it was deliberately hidden. Whatever records are stored down there, James wanted them preserved where Malcolm couldn't find them. And my son has no idea it exists. I wait until Malcolm's car disappears down the drive before descending into the wine cellar. The sublevel access is behind a barrel rack most people don't know exists. The vault door is exactly where James said it would be, hidden behind the 1984 Cabernet racks in the cellar sublevel. 3 brass keys, 3 locks. The mechanisms resist at first 40 years of disuse, but turn with pressure. The vault swings inward on silent hinges. Cool air rushes out, climate-controlled even after decades. The space is small, maybe 8 feet square, lined with filing boxes labeled in James's careful handwriting. Financial, 1985 to 1990. Contracts, original. Correspondence, legal. I pull the chain on the single overhead bulb. Yellow light floods shelves I helped build 4 decades ago when we thought we were protecting our legacy from corporate raiders. Still here, James, I whisper. Everything you wanted preserved, still here. The box labeled Financial Records, Original Copies, sits on the middle shelf. I lift it down and set it on the small table James installed for document review. Inside ledgers in my handwriting. Share certificates with both our signatures. Transaction logs tracking every equity change. The unaltered truth of who owns Stone Valley Vineyards. But on top of the historical documents are photocopies that look recent, not yellowed with age. Communications between Malcolm and Riverside Estate Group. Emails discussing acquisition strategy and incremental ownership transfer to avoid notification triggers. Dated 2 years ago, when James was in hospice. My son was planning to steal the vineyard while his father was dying. James built this vault to protect our legacy from outsiders. He never imagined the threat would come from inside our own family. Beneath the emails, ownership transfer documents. Official share certificates showing systematic shifts from Carolyn Elizabeth Stone, sole proprietor, to Riverside Estate Group, LLC, partial. I traced the dates. April 7th, 0.5% transferred. April 14th, 0.5%. April 21st, 0.5%. Weekly transfers. Each small enough not to trigger notifications. Malcolm stealing in precise increments for 8 months. I pull out my phone and check the calendar, scrolling back to April. April 7th, the first transfer date. My breath catches. April 7th, the day I fell in the vineyard. The day Dr. Harrison diagnosed my stroke and started the medication protocol. 8 months of playing confused, while my son played doctor with a staged diagnosis. The same day. Not coincidence. Not Malcolm exploiting my medical decline. He created it. There was no stroke, I say aloud to the empty vault. There was no fall. Malcolm, what did you do to me? Every assumption I'd made was wrong. I thought Malcolm had seen my weakness and exploited it, but he'd manufactured it with Dr. Harrison's help. Then used my supposed incompetence as legal cover to systematically transfer ownership while I stumbled through fog he'd deliberately created. I photograph every document with shaking hands, rage, not age, making them tremble. The ledgers, the transfer certificates. Malcolm's emails with Riverside from when James was dying. But beneath the stack of share transfers, I find something that stops my breath. A medical file folder, light blue, label typed in clinical font, C. Stone, treatment protocol. Dr. Harrison's signature on the cover sheet. Inside, a prescription log showing 8 months of medications. I recognize some names from my pill organizer, but others I've never seen. Cross-referenced notes in Harrison's handwriting, cognitive impairment agents, memory disruption, dosage, confusion maintenance protocol. They didn't just diagnose a fake stroke. They've been drugging me for 8 months. I spent Tuesday night calling Fletcher's contacts. He recommended an independent neurologist and arranged an emergency meeting for dawn Wednesday. Doctor. Quinton Rhodes meets me in the medical records office at 6:30 Wednesday morning. 3 hours before I'm supposed to sign my vineyard away. Doctor. Quinton Rhodes, the independent neurologist Fletcher recommended, has the kind of precise, careful manner that makes you trust his analysis of things most doctors would miss. Wire-rimmed glasses, tablet already open to medical databases. Thank you for seeing me on no notice, I say, setting the medication file on the desk. Fletcher said it was urgent. He opens the file, scans the first page, and his expression sharpens. This is a treatment protocol for cognitive impairment agents. Where did you get this? Hidden in my late husband's archive. I need you to tell me if my stroke 8 months ago was real or if someone made it happen. You're asking if you were deliberately incapacitated. That's a serious allegation. I have prescription logs showing confusion-inducing medications and share transfers that started the same day as my diagnosis. I need medical proof before 9 a.m. He pulls his tablet closer. I'll need your hospital admission records. April, you said. I give him the date. April 7th. He accesses the hospital database, pulls up my file, starts reading. The office smells like coffee and antiseptic, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Your admitting physician ran a standard toxicology panel. He scrolls through records. Blood work from admission shows significant sedative presence, benzodiazepines and anticholinergic compounds. What do those do? They cause confusion, dizziness, slurred speech, motor impairment, the symptoms you were experiencing. I trusted Dr. Harrison with my health, Malcolm with my legacy, and both of them poisoned me in different ways. Dr. Harrison diagnosed a stroke, I say carefully. He prescribed rest and cognitive therapy. Dr. Harrison wasn't your admitting physician. Dr. Sarah Martinez was on duty in the ER. She ordered this toxicology panel. He highlights numbers on the screen. She noted elevated sedative levels and recommended neurological consultation to rule out poisoning. Harrison took over your care the following day and diagnosed a stroke instead. Harrison ignored toxicology evidence suggesting chemical cause. That's not medical error. That's deliberate malpractice. My phone sits on the desk, silent but heavy. In 3 hours, Malcolm expects me to sign the contract. Can you determine when I was dosed? Dr. Rhodes pulls up concentration analysis. Based on metabolic breakdown, the sedative dosage peaked 10 to 12 hours before admission. When did you sign management authority over to your son? The morning after the stroke. Malcolm brought the papers to the hospital. I could barely hold the pen. They drugged me in my own home and made me sign papers while I was chemically incompetent. You weren't having a stroke, Mrs. Stone. Dr. Rhodes meets my eyes with clinical certainty. Someone dosed you to fake the symptoms the night before you signed management authority to your son. He prints the blood panel analysis, signs an affidavit stating the stroke diagnosis was medically impossible given the toxicology evidence, and hands it to me. This should be enough for legal invalidation and grounds for criminal investigation. My phone rings. Malcolm's name on the screen. I answer, yes. Mom, we're moving the signing to 8 a.m. The buyers have a scheduling conflict. Can you be ready in 30 minutes? 30 minutes, not 3 hours. He knows I found something, and he's trying to execute the contract before I can stop him. I told Malcolm I needed 2 hours to prepare. He reluctantly moved the signing to Thursday morning instead. That gave me Wednesday to finish my case. I spread 8 months of evidence across Sheriff Warren Graves's desk at noon Wednesday, one day before I either reclaim my vineyard or lose it forever. Sheriff Warren Graves was James's best friend for 40 years. The kind of man who remembers every promise and never stops being a cop, even when you need him to be something more. Silver-haired, weathered, eyes that miss nothing. Warren, I need you to arrest my son tomorrow. Here's why. He leans back, expression carefully neutral. Carolyn, James was my best friend. If Malcolm did this to you, I want every detail. I lay out documents, vault ledgers showing Malcolm's incremental share transfers starting April 7th. Doctor, Rhodes's affidavit proving I was drugged. The recording of Laurie admitting the undervalued sale price. Fletcher's investigation proving the buyer is Malcolm's partner. 8 months of systematic theft, medical fraud, and conspiracy. It all started the day he drugged me. Warren picks up Dr. Rhodes's affidavit, reads it twice. Chemical incapacitation to fake stroke symptoms. He plays the dinner recording. Laurie's voice. 27 million for a property this size is actually quite generous. Malcolm's sharp correction. Warren's jaw tightens. He examines the vault ledgers, tracing weekly transfers. 0.5% increments. Small enough to avoid recording alerts. I have something else, Warren says quietly. 3 weeks ago, someone sent an anonymous tip flagging unusual property transfer activity at Stone Valley Vineyards. I've been building a case, waiting to see who would surface. I freeze. Someone else was watching Malcolm. Someone who knew enough to spot the pattern. I never found out who. He taps Fletcher's report. But this confirms everything. Warren and James built their friendship over 40 years of shared fishing trips and vineyard harvests. Now, Warren is helping me put James's son in prison. The blood panel proves chemical incapacitation, Warren says, assembling documents. The recordings establish fraud. The ledgers show systematic theft. Carolyn, I can arrest him right now. No, I need you to wait until tomorrow's signing. Why? Because I want him to confess everything on tape first. Fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, assault with a chemical substance. I want charges that stick. Warren, not a plea bargain. Before I explain exactly how we're going to turn tomorrow's signing into a trap, I need to know if you were in my position, your own child stealing everything you built. Would you choose A, immediate arrest and quick justice, or B, let them confess first and face maximum charges? Comment A or B with one reason why, so I can see how you're reading this moment. Please note what follows contains some recreated details for narrative effect. The lesson is what matters. Warren studies me. You want a full confession. I want decades, not months. Tomorrow's signing won't be a surrender. It's going to be a confession booth with handcuffs waiting outside. Here's how it works, Warren says. You go to the signing, wear your recording device. Get Malcolm talking about the deal, the timeline, why he moved so fast. Get details on tape. And you? Deputies positioned outside the conference room. When you say, I think we need witnesses for this, we move in for arrests. I nod, memorizing the signal. Carolyn, Warren leans forward. If Malcolm realizes you're recording, if he gets violent, if anything goes wrong, you leave immediately. I know the risk. James would kill me if I let you walk into danger. James would want me to save what we built. I meet his eyes. Tomorrow, just keep them talking long enough for us to arrive. Warren squeezes my shoulder as I stand to leave, the same gesture James used when I faced something difficult. Through his office window, I see Malcolm's truck parked across the street at the coffee shop. He's watching the sheriff's office. I drove back from Warren's office carefully, but Malcolm's truck stayed visible in my rear view until I reached the Vineyard. He knows. Malcolm opens his desk drawer at 4 p.m. Wednesday, and I watch from the operations office doorway as he freezes, staring at the tiny blinking red light I forgot to disable. The backup recorder. I'd planted it behind the file folders 2 days ago to capture office conversations. Voice activated, professional grade, nearly invisible unless you're looking directly at it. He's looking directly at it. Malcolm pulls the device out slowly, holding it between thumb and forefinger like something contaminated. The indicator light blinks every 5 seconds. Red. Unmistakable. How long has this been here? I keep my expression vague. I was checking the barrel inventory logs you asked about. This is a voice-activated recorder. He turns it over, examining the label. Professional grade. When did you become capable of buying surveillance equipment? Mom. The pretense is cracking. I don't know what that is. Yes, you do. Malcolm sets the device on his desk, studies my face with new calculation. You've been recording me. How long have you known? The moment he understands I've been lucid all along, something shifts in his eyes. Not shame, not regret, just cold recalibration. Known what? Malcolm, that you drugged me, that you're stealing my vineyard, that you've been planning this since your father died. The masks fall, all of them. 8 months of performance, ending in 10 seconds of honesty. You should have stayed confused, Mom. It would have been easier for everyone. Easier for you, you mean? He picks up the recorder again, turns it over in his hands. I wait for him to smash it, destroy the evidence, panic. He doesn't. He's not panicking, he's adapting. Malcolm sets the recorder back in the drawer carefully, deliberately, and smiles directly at the camera lens. Then he pulls out his phone and calls Laurie while maintaining eye contact with me. Laurie, Mom's been recording us. She knows everything. Pause. Yes, she's been lucid, probably for weeks. Another pause, expression hardening. We're moving the signing to tonight. Malcolm. He holds up one finger, silencing me. 6 p.m. Have our lawyer bring the contracts here instead of the conference room. And call Dr. Harrison. We might need him. He ends the call. Malcolm, destroying that device won't help you tomorrow. Who said anything about tomorrow? He leans against his desk, arms crossed. You're signing in 2 hours, or I'm filing the incapacity petition right now, and you'll be in a memory care facility by midnight. Warren knows. Warren knows you visited his office. What's he going to arrest me for? Preparing to sell property I have legal authority to manage. Malcolm's smile turns colder. You gave me that authority 8 months ago when you signed the medical proxy, remember? You were so confused that day. Because you drugged me. Prove it. Oh wait, you have 8 months of pills you took voluntarily. Doctor's orders, with your signature on every refill authorization. The recording device sits in his drawer, red light still blinking. He's leaving it running. Letting it capture this conversation because he doesn't think it matters anymore. The lawyer will be here at 6 p.m. with the contracts, Malcolm says, walking toward me. You can sign willingly and keep some dignity, or I'll have Dr. Harrison commit you tonight under emergency psychiatric hold, and you'll sign from a hospital bed. Your choice, Mom. He pauses in the doorway. 2 hours. I suggest you use them to accept reality instead of fighting it. He leaves the recording device running in the drawer. I have 2 hours to stop a signing I'm not ready for. I called Fletcher from my car. 15 minutes later, we're meeting at the same St. Helena coffee shop. Fletcher spreads the final appraisal documents across the table at 5 p.m., 45 minutes before Malcolm's threatened signing. When Laurie walks through the door, I see her before Fletcher does, through the window. Laurie's car pulling into the lot, her purposeful stride toward the entrance. Fletcher, we have company. He glances up, assesses in half a second. Friend or problem? Malcolm's wife. Fletcher's forensic appraisal covers 3 pages, but the summary is clear enough to read from across a room. True market value, $42. 000,000. Contracted sale price, $31 million. Buyer entity, Riverside Estate Group. Principal, Marcus Dahlberg. Transaction structured as same-day resale to secondary buyer at full appraised value. Profit allocation split, 70-30. Malcolm Stone/Marcus Dahlberg. Malcolm wasn't just stealing the vineyard. He was planning to pocket the entire $11 million difference, while I received nothing beyond the fraudulent sale price. The coffee shop smells like espresso and cinnamon. Afternoon light slanting through windows onto evidence I'm not supposed to have. Malcolm knows I've been lucid, I tell Fletcher quickly. He found one of my recording devices. He's forcing the signing tonight at 6 to prevent me from organizing resistance. Warren and Dalton can be there in 90 minutes. Can you stall for 90 minutes? I don't have a choice if I refuse. Malcolm's filing emergency conservatorship, and I'll be committed by midnight. Laurie pushes through the door, spots me immediately, and her expression shifts from suspicion to alarm as she sees the documents. The moment Laurie walks through that door, I see my entire careful plan unraveling. But then I remember I've been acting confused for 8 months, and one more performance won't kill me. Carolyn, what are you doing here? Laurie approaches our table, eyes scanning the appraisal header. Malcolm said you were resting at the cottage. Laurie, I keep my voice soft, vague. This is Fletcher Norwood. He was a friend of James's. He was just checking on me. Fletcher stands, offers his hand with professional courtesy. Mrs. Stone, Fletcher Norwood, Vineyard appraiser. Your husband contacted me weeks ago about a property evaluation. Those look like property appraisal documents, Laurie says, not taking the offered hand. Not a friendly visit. I'm concerned about Carolyn's well-being given the Vineyard transition, Fletcher says smoothly. Just making sure she understands what she's signing. The stress can be overwhelming for someone in her condition. Laurie's suspicion hangs in the air like vineyard frost, dangerous, visible, but not quite deadly if I move carefully enough. Malcolm has everything under control, Laurie says, tone sharp. Carolyn, you should go home and rest before tonight's signing. 6 p.m., remember? I've been thinking about that. I let my hands tremble as I gather Fletcher's documents. Tonight feels rushed. I need time to think, to prepare. Malcolm was very clear. Tell Malcolm I'll sign tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. as originally planned. I stand slowly, using the table for support. I need tonight to think, to say goodbye to what James and I built. Laurie's eyes narrow. She doesn't believe the performance, but she can't prove the alliance sitting across from her. I'll tell him, she says finally. But Carolyn, delaying won't change the outcome. You're signing tomorrow, one way or another. She pulls out her phone, already dialing, as she walks toward the exit. Fletcher gathers the appraisal documents and meets my eyes. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She just gave us exactly what we needed. 12 more hours to position everyone. Exactly. Through the window, I watch Laurie stop on the sidewalk mid-conversation. She turns around, raises her phone, and photographs the coffee shop entrance, capturing me and Fletcher together. The cover story won't hold until morning, but it doesn't have to. I didn't sleep Wednesday night. Malcolm called 3 times, each message more threatening, but I didn't answer. By dawn Thursday, I'd tested the brooch recorder 5 times and memorized Warren's signal phrase. 2 men in expensive suits arrive at the Vineyard conference room at 10 a.m. Thursday, carrying briefcases that will either seal my defeat or witness my son's arrest. Gregory Thorne, the lead corporate attorney, has the smooth confidence of someone who handles million-dollar transactions weekly and doesn't ask uncomfortable questions about his clients. I recognize him from a charity auction 3 years ago. Local Napa attorney, not international representation. The supposedly foreign conglomerate is using domestic lawyers. Victoria Kendall, his associate, arranges documents with mechanical precision that suggests she's been through this exact signing ceremony dozens of times before. Malcolm and Laurie play perfect hosts, offering coffee and discussing Vineyard history as if this is a legitimate business transaction. We're pleased to finalize this acquisition on behalf of our client, Thorne says, opening his briefcase. The terms are exactly as negotiated. Malcolm gestures to me with practiced concern. My mother built this vineyard with her late husband. It's an emotional day, but she understands this is the right decision. I understand perfectly what's happening here, I say quietly. The conference room smells like furniture polish and fresh coffee. Through the window, morning light falls across grapevines James and I planted 40 years ago. My hand rests on the brooch recorder. 10:15. Warren should arrive in 20 minutes. Thorne spreads the contract across the polished table. Page 12 outlines the payment schedule. Wire transfer within 48 hours of execution. Page 18 details property rights transfer, effective immediately upon signature. Malcolm arranges the papers with James's old fountain pen, the one my husband used to sign our original partnership 40 years ago, and the symbolism makes me want to vomit. Mrs. Stone, do you have any questions about the terms before signing? Kendall's voice is professionally neutral. I'd like to understand who's actually buying my vineyard. Your client's name isn't listed anywhere in these documents. Thorne doesn't miss a beat. Our client prefers confidentiality for corporate privacy reasons. The holding company structure is standard for international acquisitions of this nature. Malcolm leans forward. Mom, we've been through this. The buyer is legitimate. You're protected by the contract terms. But his eyes flick toward Laurie for half a second, just long enough for the brooch recorder to capture the tell. Page 24 contains all corporate entity information, Kendall adds. Flipping to a section dense with legal language about Stellar Holdings International, LLC, and its Byzantine ownership structure. This conference room has hosted harvest celebrations and retirement parties. Now it's a stage for my son's final performance before the buddies. Curtain comes down. The payment terms are quite generous, Thorne continues. Full amount upon closing, no contingencies, no residency requirements. You're free to remain on the property or relocate as you choose. Except Malcolm's already selected my memory care facility 200 miles away. Malcolm slides the signature page across the polished wood, pen beside it. You said you'd sign this morning. Everyone's here. The contracts are ready. His tone carries practiced, gentle authority that barely conceals impatience. Just sign here, Mother. The signature page sits in front of me, Malcolm's hand still on the contract edge, everyone watching. Through the conference room window, I see a police cruiser pulling into the vineyard entrance. Too early. Warren wasn't supposed to arrive for 15 more minutes. Malcolm follows my gaze and sees it too. Malcolm's hand tightens on the contract edge. His eyes flick from the police cruiser back to me, calculation racing behind his expression. I pick up the pen Malcolm placed beside the signature page, then set it down again without signing. I'd like to review the legal description of the property one more time. Page 7, I think. Through the window, Warren exits his cruiser, deliberate, unhurried. 2 deputies emerge from a second vehicle I hadn't noticed. Malcolm follows my gaze, jaw tightening. Mom! We've been through every page twice. Everyone's time is valuable. I'm signing over 40 years of my life. I'm entitled to be thorough. Thorne shifts in his seat. Mrs. Stone, if you have specific concerns about the legal description, I can clarify. Give us a moment, Malcolm interrupts, standing. My mother needs family reassurance. Could you wait in the hallway? Thorne and Kendall exchange glances, but gather their briefcases. Professional courtesy requires compliance. They step outside, closing the door with a soft click. The attorneys leave, and Malcolm's face changes. The gracious sun becomes something colder, something I don't recognize as mine. Malcolm, there's a sheriff's car outside. I keep my voice uncertain. Why is law enforcement here? That's exactly why you need to sign this right now. He slides the contract closer. Before there are complications you don't understand. What complications? Laurie moves to the window, watches Warren approaching across the parking lot. Malcolm, they're coming to the building! I know. Malcolm leans over the table, both hands flat on the polished wood. Mom, listen carefully. You're going to sign this contract in the next 60 seconds, or things will get very difficult for everyone. Difficult how? He glances at Laurie, then leans close to my ear. His voice drops to barely above a whisper, but the brooch recorder catches every syllable. The wine cellar Dad built, that old gas heating system, is a fire hazard. Inspectors have warned us for years about compliance violations. My blood runs cold. You're threatening to burn down your father's cellar? I'm saying accidents happen to uncooperative people. His hand moves to rest on my shoulder, grip tight enough to hurt. Sign the contract, or find out how fast 40-year-old oak barrels burn, with or without people inside. My son just threatened to burn down the cellar where his father taught him to taste wine. The conference room smells like coffee and Malcolm's cologne and fear. Outside, gravel crunches under Warren's boots as he crosses toward the entrance. You wouldn't. I would. Malcolm straightens, retrieves the pen, presses it into my hand. Because I've come too far to stop now. 8 months of planning, 42 million in debts, and a Friday deadline with creditors who don't accept excuses. Through the window, Warren reaches the building entrance. 30 seconds before he walks through that door. I smile weakly at Malcolm, let my hand tremble around the pen, nod agreement like a frightened old woman who's finally broken. The brooch recorder has captured everything, the arson threat, the debt amount, the admission of 8 months of planning. I have what I need. Malcolm sees Warren through the window, and his expression hardens with desperate urgency. Now, Mum! Sign it now! I position the pen over the signature line. Malcolm grabs my wrist. He's going to force my hand to the paper. Malcolm's fingers dig into my wrist, pulling the pen toward the signature line. Outside, Warren's footsteps echo on the building's front steps. I pull my wrist from Malcolm's grip and call the attorneys back into the room before he can force my hand to the signature page. Mr. Thorne, Miss Kendall, I'm sorry, but I have a few more questions before I sign. The door opens and both attorneys return, professional masks sliding back into place. Malcolm's jaw clenches, but he can't refuse without appearing to rush his supposedly confused mother through a major transaction. Of course, Mrs. Stone, Thorne says, retaking his seat. What would you like to know? Mr. Thorne, before I sign, I'd like you to walk me through the valuation methodology. How did you arrive at 31 million? Malcolm's hand tightens on the back of his chair. Mom, we've discussed this. The appraisal is standard industry practice. I'm entitled to understand what I'm signing, Malcolm. I turn to Thorne with grandmotherly patience. Mr. Thorne, please continue. Thorne pulls out a bound appraisal report. The comparable sales in Napa Valley over the past 18 months show average per-acre valuations of approximately $85,000. Stone Valley Vineyards encompasses 120 acres of producing vineyard, plus improvements, equipment, and inventory. I nod attentively, watching the vineyard access road through the window over his shoulder. No patrol car visible yet. What about the premium for our specific terroir? The 1984 Cabernet block alone is worth... Mrs. Stone, those factors are reflected in the adjusted valuation on page 9. I ask about soil composition analysis, like a woman who cares about methodology, instead of a woman watching her son realize his fraud is about to collapse. Could you walk me through page 9, the adjustment calculations? Thorne flips to the referenced page, begins explaining depreciation methodology, equipment age factors, market trend adjustments. Technical detail that takes minutes to explain properly. Malcolm shifts his weight, checks his watch, glances toward the window. And the inventory valuation includes barrel aging, bottled reserve stock, work-in-progress calculations based on... What about comparables from the premium Rutherford appellation specifically? I interrupt gently. Our location within Napa Valley affects value, doesn't it? Victoria Kendall opens her laptop. We can pull those specific comparables if you'd like to see the methodology breakdown. That would be very helpful. Each question I ask is another 30 seconds Warren gets closer. Another inch of rope Malcolm doesn't know he's tying around his own future. Malcolm's phone buzzes. He checks it, expression hardening. His eyes flick to the window, then back to me. Mom, you're stalling. I'm being thorough. I turn back to Kendall. You were saying about the Rutherford comparables. Kendall pulls up a spreadsheet, starts walking through data points. Malcolm's jaw muscles work like he's grinding teeth to powder. Through the window, movement catches my eye. A sheriff's patrol vehicle turns onto the Vineyard access road, still half a mile away, but closing steadily. Sunlight flashes off the light bar. Malcolm follows my gaze and sees it too. That's very thorough, Ms. Kendall, I say. Now, about the equipment assessment on page 14. Enough, Malcolm stands abruptly, his chair tipping backward. Mom, you've asked enough questions. Sign the contract, now. Why is there a sheriff's car coming to the Vineyard? Malcolm. Thorne and Kendall both turn to look out the window. Malcolm's face drains of color. This signing is over. Everyone leave, now. But Gregory Thorne isn't looking at the approaching patrol car anymore. He's staring at the contract in front of me, his professional expression shifting to confusion. Mr. Stone, why does this valuation differ from the appraisal your office sent us last week? The attorney just noticed the fraud. Thorne pulls out his phone, scrolling to an email. Your office sent us a preliminary appraisal 3 weeks ago, showing 42 million. This contract says 31. I stand from the conference table without trembling, without confusion, without a single trace of the incompetent woman Malcolm spent 8 months creating. I never had a stroke. Malcolm. My voice comes out clear, strong, steady. You poisoned me 8 months ago to fake the symptoms, then spent the next 32 weeks stealing my vineyard piece by piece. Malcolm's face drains white. Mom, what are you... My name is Carolyn Elizabeth Stone. I'm 65 years old. I co-founded this vineyard in 1986 with my late husband, James. I meet his eyes without wavering, and I am not incompetent. Laurie backs toward the door, hand to her mouth. I stopped taking the confusion-inducing medications 6 weeks ago. I continue. Before that, I'd been documenting every fraudulent transaction, every altered document, every lie you told while you thought I was too impaired to notice. Malcolm's face when he realizes I'm lucid, not confused, not declining, not the diminished mother he's been manipulating, is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. This is insane, Malcolm says, but his voice shakes. You signed the medical proxy willingly. I touch the brooch at my collar. This has been recording every conversation for 3 days. Your threat to burn the wine cellar, recorded. Laurie's admission about the sale price, recorded. Your confession about 8 months of planning and 42 million in gambling debts, all recorded. You can't. That's illegal recording. California is a 2-party consent state unless you're documenting crimes being committed against you. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, assault with a chemical substance. I take a step toward him. Doctor. Rhodes filed a toxicology affidavit with the district attorney yesterday. Fletcher Norwood filed a forensic appraisal proving you structured this sale to steal while Marcus Dahlberg resold at full value. Thorne and Kendall back toward the wall. The vault ledgers showing every share transfer filed with county court Monday. The recording of you threatening arson 20 minutes ago, Sheriff Graves has been listening from his cruiser since you walked into this room. My son is about to be arrested, and all I feel is relief that the pretending is finally over. Malcolm looks toward the window. The patrol car is in the parking lot now. Doors open. You're bluffing. You couldn't have... The conference room door swings open. Warren Graves enters with 2 deputies, handcuffs already drawn. His expression is professionally neutral, but I see the anger underneath. James was his best friend. Malcolm Stone, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy to commit grand theft, and assault with a chemical substance. Malcolm's hands curl into fists. This is insane. Mom, tell him you agreed to this sale. I agreed to nothing. My voice doesn't shake. I spent 8 months pretending to be the victim you created, so I could document every crime you committed against me. Warren nods to his deputy. Laurie Stone, you're also under arrest as an accessory to fraud and conspiracy. Laurie's face crumbles. I didn't, Malcolm. Tell them I didn't know. But Malcolm isn't looking at her. He's staring at me, searching my face for something familiar. The confused mother who couldn't remember conversations. The declining woman who needed his guidance. The incompetent elderly victim he controlled for 8 months. But that woman never existed. Warren's deputies move forward with handcuffs raised, and Malcolm's composure shatters like dropped crystal. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. Malcolm jerks away from the deputy, reaching for his wrist. Laurie, tell them. Tell them this was your idea. My daughter-in-law's face goes white, then red. My idea? You're the one who proposed the incapacity scheme. Malcolm's voice rises as the deputy catches his arm and snaps on the first cuff. You found Dr. Harrison. You negotiated with the conglomerate people. I was just... Just what? Laurie's voice could cut glass. Just the one who owed $500,000 to casinos in Reno. Just the one who came begging me for help because the loan. Sharks were threatening to break your legs. The conference room goes silent, except for the metallic click of Malcolm's second cuff locking into place. That's a lie. Malcolm strains against the deputy's grip. Warren, listen to me. My wife manipulated this entire situation. I wanted to help my mother transition gracefully, but Laurie saw an opportunity to... To what? Laurie rounds on him as another deputy approaches her. To save your life, you came to me 8 months ago, saying your mother was already declining anyway. That we could help her along while solving our financial problems. Your financial problems. Malcolm, the ones you created with your gambling addiction. I wanted justice. I built this trap. I triggered this arrest. But watching my son beg and lie is still breaking something I didn't know I had left to break. Everyone stop talking. Warren's command cuts through the rising accusations. Miss Stone, Mr. Stone, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. But Malcolm can't stop. She drugged the wine. Check her bathroom. She's the one who picked up the prescriptions from that pharmacy in Oakland. Doctor. Harrison gave her the dosing instructions. Not me. Because you set up the appointment, Laurie shouts as the deputy cuffs her hands behind her back. You're the one who found Harrison, through your poker buddies. You told me he'd done this kind of thing before, for other families. Gregory Thorne clears his throat. Sheriff, I think we should separate the defendants before... You ruined everything. Malcolm's face contorts with rage and desperation. We had it perfect. The signing was happening. But you had to get sloppy. Had to let Mother see you going through her things. I got sloppy. Laurie's laugh is bitter and sharp. You're the one who left the vault documents where Leland could find them. You're the one who threatened him in the hallway where anyone could hear. You're the one who changed the signing time 6 times because you were panicking. They're tearing each other apart like animals in a trap, and all I can think is that I'm the one who set the spring. Enough! Warren positions himself between them. Take Mr. Stone to Unit 3. Miss Stone goes in Unit 5. Keep them separated. This is your fault, Malcolm shouts at Laurie, as the deputy guides him toward the door. You said she'd never figure it out. You said she was too old, too confused. You said you'd stopped gambling, Laurie screams back. You said the debts were paid. But I found the casino statements. Malcolm, you owed another $200,000 we didn't even discuss. Victoria Kendall moves quietly to my side as the shouting continues. Mrs. Stone, perhaps you should step outside. You don't need to witness this, but I do. I need to see exactly what my son has become. I need to remember this moment every time I'm tempted to doubt what I've done. Warren's deputies escort Malcolm and Laurie in opposite directions, still shouting accusations as they're led to separate patrol cars. Through the conference room window, I see Hadley standing near the Vineyard entrance, watching her parents being arrested. She meets my eyes across 50 yards of vines. My granddaughter just witnessed her entire family destroy itself. An hour after Malcolm and Laurie are driven away in separate patrol cars, Fletcher Norwood sits across from me in the emptied conference room and says he needs to confess something. The signing documents are still scattered across the table. Warren is photographing the scene at the far end of the room, camera flashes punctuating the silence. Fletcher's hands fold on the mahogany between us. Carolyn, there's something I didn't tell you about my investigation timeline. You found something else in the vault records. I found everything 3 weeks ago, and I filed it with the court 2 weeks before today. The words don't land immediately. Filed what? Complete fraud documentation. The Marcus Dahlberg Shell Company, the 8-month share transfers, the sedative evidence. I documented everything and filed under seal with Judge Morrison's clerk. Understanding comes slowly. You built a backup plan without telling me. I built a backup plan because I believed you. Everyone else thought you were declining, but your questions were too sharp, too strategic. You weren't confused. You were hunting. The air conditioning hums. Through the window, Hadley still stands near the Vineyard entrance, unmoving against the November vines. For 8 months, everyone saw a declining old woman. Fletcher saw a fighter pretending to be prey, and he built safety nets I never knew existed. Warren looks up from his camera. Fletcher filed what? Sealed documentation with the probate court. If today had failed, if Malcolm had prevented the arrest or destroyed evidence, Judge Morrison would have received my activation. Request tomorrow. The fraud evidence was already in the court's possession. Today didn't have to work. My voice catches. Today needed to work for criminal charges. Warren needed to witness the fraud in action, but the Vineyard was already protected. Even if you'd signed those papers, the court documentation would have nullified everything within 48 hours. I gripped the table edge, polished wood, smooth under my palms. 2 weeks of mounting desperation, fear that one mistake would cost 40 years of work, all resting on a premise that wasn't true. Why didn't you tell me you'd filed court documentation? Because you needed to believe today was the only chance. That performance of desperation in the coffee shop with Laurie, that fear when Malcolm grabbed your wrist, it was real because you thought everything depended on this moment. If you'd known about the backup, would you have felt that same urgency? No, I would have been calmer, more controlled. And Malcolm would have noticed, your son knows you. If you'd seemed too confident about signing away your life's work, he would have suspected surveillance or police involvement. The trap worked because your fear was genuine. Trust is watching someone walk a tightrope and building a net below without telling them. So they focus on the walk instead of the fall. Warren sets down his camera. That's risky professional judgment, Fletcher. The first meeting in her kitchen, she asked me to trace the buyer through 3 shell company layers. That's not someone whose memory is failing. That's someone building a legal case. The weight of being seen settles over me like warm sunlight. James saw me this way once, when everyone said a widow couldn't run a vineyard alone. Hadley sees me this way now, but Fletcher saw through the performance to the calculation beneath, and staked his reputation on that assessment. I reach across the table and grip his hand. The contact is brief but firm, his skin warm against my palm. Thank you for trusting an old woman everyone thought was senile. Fletcher returns the pressure. The woman who orchestrated today's operation doesn't qualify as senile. Warren closes his evidence folder. I'll be arresting Dr. Harrison by end of day for medical fraud conspiracy. Mrs. Stone, I'll need you at the station tomorrow for formal statements. The door closes behind Warren. Through the window, the vineyard stretches toward the hills. 40 years of work, 8 months of theft, 1 morning of justice. Afternoon light slants golden across the November vines. But Hadley is still standing at the entrance, alone. Malcolm and Laurie face years in prison. Victory tastes different than I expected. 3 weeks after the arrests. I sit in Napa County Courthouse while Deputy District Attorney Sarah Brennan lays out the complete criminal case against my son and daughter-in-law. Victory tasted like 3 weeks of silent dinners with Hadley in the guest cottage. Fletcher's court filing restoring my ownership. And this, watching Malcolm and Laurie sit 20 feet apart in orange jumpsuits, both avoiding my eyes. Sarah Brennan has the efficient precision of someone who's prosecuted dozens of fraud cases. She stands before Judge Carol Hartman with exhibits representing 8 months of my life, reduced to evidence numbers. The evidence establishes a conspiracy spanning 8 months, beginning with chemical assault against the victim to create false medical justification for theft. Sarah's voice carries clearly. People's Exhibit 7, Dr. Rhodes's toxicology affidavit, confirming systematic sedative poisoning. Dalton sits beside me. This hearing is pure formality. Exhibit 9, Vault Ledgers, documenting defendant Malcolm Stone's systematic share transfers. Exhibit 11, recorded admission by defendant Laurie Stone regarding the fraudulent offer. Malcolm's attorney scribbles notes, but doesn't object. Your Honor, we also have testimony from Dr. Harrison's plea agreement entered last week. Sarah pauses. The physician who fabricated Mrs. Stone's stroke diagnosis has provided detailed statements about defendant Malcolm Stone recruiting him 8 months ago and paying $15,000 to create false medical justification. Dr. Harrison already flipped. The man who diagnosed symptoms I didn't have is now testifying against the son who paid him. Exhibit 12. Defendant Malcolm Stone's recorded threat to commit arson. Both defendants continue to provide contradictory statements, blaming each other, Your Honor, demonstrating consciousness of guilt. I thought watching my son be arrested would be the hardest part. Sitting in this courtroom while prosecutors catalog his crimes against me, that's somehow worse. Judge Hartman reviews the exhibits methodically. What's the people's position on bail? Given the defendant's mutual accusations and access to substantial assets, the people request bail be denied. Flight risk is substantial. Both defendants have shown willingness to blame each other, suggesting continued obstruction. Counsels for the defense. Laurie's attorney stands. Your Honor, my client has no prior record and requests reasonable bail. Your client is accused of conspiring to poison and defraud a 65-year-old woman while claiming the scheme was her. Co-defendant's idea. Bail is denied for both defendants. Malcolm's shoulders hunch forward, hands cuffed at his waist. Throughout this hearing, he stared at the table, the floor, the judge, anywhere except where I sit. Defendants will remain in custody at Napa County Jail with separate housing due to ongoing hostility. Judge Hartman's gavel taps. Trial date is set for March 15th. Does the defense wish to enter pleas? Not guilty, Your Honor, both attorneys say. Malcolm's orange jumpsuit is the color of the harvest sunrise he used to watch with his father, and I hate that my brain makes that connection. Defendants are remanded to custody. The bailiff approaches Malcolm's table. As he stands, Malcolm finally turns slightly toward the gallery, not looking at me directly, but acknowledging I exist. Malcolm, my voice comes out quiet. Look at me. He freezes, jaw tightening, eyes fixed over my left shoulder. Then he leans toward his attorney and whispers something urgent, expression twisted with deflecting rage. His attorney shakes his head. Malcolm's whisper gets more insistent. I can read the pattern, still blaming Laurie, still convinced someone else destroyed his life, still unable to accept he poisoned his own mother. Save it for trial, counsel. Judge Hartman's tone is sharp. The bailiff leads Malcolm and Laurie through separate doors. Dalton touches my shoulder. Are you okay? I can't answer because Hadley just walked into the courtroom gallery, 17, with her father's dark hair and my late husband's eyes. My granddaughter missed the hearing, but arrived in time to see her parents in handcuffs disappearing through steel doors. The look on her face will haunt me longer than anything Malcolm did. 1 month after Malcolm's arrest. Dalton brings the court order to the operations office. Full ownership restored. All fraudulent transfers nullified. Stone Valley Vineyards legally mine again. Hadley's haunted expression at the courthouse lingered for days. We didn't speak on the steps. She stayed with friends that week. I stayed alone with 40 years of memories and mounting legal paperwork. Now Dalton and Fletcher sit across my desk with a final decree. The court declares all transfers executed under fraudulent incapacity claims to be void ab initio, invalid from the beginning. Dalton slides the document forward. Judge Hartman's signature official at the bottom. Every share Malcolm moved, every contract he signed, legally erased. I scan the dense paragraphs. You won. You kept it. You survived. What about the conglomerate? Can they sue for contract enforcement? They have no standing. The contract was procured through fraud and signed by parties with no legal authority to sell. It never existed in law. Fletcher taps a section midway down the second page. There's also a forfeiture provision. Malcolm and Laurie's criminal convictions will trigger automatic estate exclusion. They're permanently barred from inheriting any portion of the vineyard, even after prison. The words take a moment to land. They can never inherit. Elder abuse combined with fraud creates statutory forfeiture in California state law. The court's protecting against abusers profiting from reconciliation. The vineyard passes to Hadley exclusively, regardless of future circumstances. Malcolm destroyed his inheritance the moment he drugged my wine. Not because I'm angry, because the law won't allow him to benefit, even if I forgive him someday. The court adopted my full appraisal as official record. Fletcher opens his folder. 42 million, not 31. That 11 million difference, Malcolm would have pocketed that with Marcus Dahlberg. Fletcher's appraisal, proving 42 million, feels less like victory and more like a price tag on everything I lost to keep this place. The estate is secure now for Hadley when you're ready to establish inheritance structure. Dalton gathers exhibits into neat stacks. Your son can't touch it from prison. You're free to build legitimate succession planning. Free. The word should feel lighter. They leave me with copies, restoration orders, voided contracts, forfeiture provisions, certified appraisals. The paperwork weighs almost nothing. The weight it represents could crush foundations. I walk outside into December afternoon sun toward the vineyard entrance. The November harvest is finished. The vines stand bare against the hills, dormant until spring. The stone nameplate has stood here 38 years. Stone Valley Vineyards, established 1986. James and Carolyn Stone. Granite and bronze letters, weathered but permanent. I touched James's name, carved deep enough to last generations. We kept it, James. It cost me our son, but we kept it. The granite is cold under my palm, solid and unyielding. James built this place when everyone said a small independent vineyard couldn't survive. We proved them wrong for 40 years. The vineyard is mine again, the way a battlefield belongs to whoever's still standing when the smoke clears. I traced the carved letters James. He died 8 years ago, thinking Malcolm would carry forward what we built. He never knew our son saw it as collateral to cover gambling debts, as $42 million of assets instead of 40 years of love. The December wind moves through bare vines, making the support wires hum faintly. The main house stands where it stood since 1986. The cellars hold vintages James labeled by hand. And I'm 65. Standing alone in front of a $42 million vineyard, I fought 8 months of drugging, fraud, and family destruction to keep. I'm not sure I want it anymore. Behind me, someone clears their throat. Hadley, 17 and exhausted, carrying a duffel bag. My granddaughter came to ask if she can move into the cottage. I find Leland Quincy in the wine cellar 5 weeks after Malcolm's arrest, checking barrel temperatures like he never stopped working here, even though my son fired him for loyalty to me. Hadley moved into the cottage the week after our conversation at the vineyard entrance. We haven't talked much since, just morning coffee and careful distance. Leland straightens from his clipboard like he's been caught trespassing. Leland, you don't work here anymore. Malcolm fired you. The old man's weathered face shows no guilt. The 1984 Cabernet block doesn't care who signs my paycheck, Mrs. Stone. Someone needs to monitor the oak aging. The cellar smells like wine and wood. Decades of fermentation soaked into stone walls. Leland's worked here since James hired him 30 years ago. How long have you been coming back? Since the week after Malcolm escorted me out. Figured someone needed to keep the cellar running while you dealt with legal matters. 5 weeks of unpaid work. maintaining barrels and monitoring fermentation because he couldn't stay away, not from employment, but from the wine itself. That's what I came to talk about. I want you back as cellar master, official, with a contract Malcolm can never touch again. Relief flickers across Leland's expression. When do you want me to start? You already started 5 weeks ago, but I'm not offering you the same position. Confusion crosses his face. I'm offering you 5% equity ownership, cellar master and partner, not just employee. The cup in Leland's hand trembles. Mrs. Stone, I can't, that's $2 million worth of Vineyard. James used to say the best partnerships are built on who shows up when there's work to do and nothing to gain. Leland's been showing up for decades. You risked your job and your reputation to help me. You left those vault keys knowing Malcolm would figure it out eventually. I pour coffee from Leland's thermos, the bitter smell sharp in the cool air. This Vineyard survived because you chose the right side when it cost you everything. I chose the side James would have wanted. Your husband taught me everything I know about wine. I wasn't going to let his son destroy what he built. The cellar stretches quiet around us. Oak barrels in neat rows under vaulted ceilings James designed 40 years ago. Leland maintained it through droughts, through James's death, through 8 months of Malcolm's theft. James would have done the same thing. He always said loyalty runs both directions. Leland sets down his cup, eyes bright. The right person finally won. Boss. Boss. He hasn't called me that since James died. Hearing it now, the acknowledgement that I'm truly in charge, that the vineyard belongs to someone who values what it represents, breaks something loose in my chest. 5% means you have legal voting authority on major decisions. Someone who actually understands winemaking will have a say in how this place runs. Giving Leland equity isn't charity. It's finally putting his name on what his hands have been building all along. You're protecting against Malcolm happening again, Leland says quietly. Against single-person control. I'm protecting against my own worst decisions. I gave Malcolm authority because he was my son. I should have given it to people who earned it through decades of showing up. Leland picks up his coffee, the taste warming his expression. When do you want the partnership papers drawn up? Dalton's preparing them this week. We stand together in the cellar James built, drinking coffee among barrels we've both protected from different kinds of theft. The partnership makes Leland's loyalty official, transforms decades of unpaid overtime into actual ownership, ensures someone who cares about wine itself, not just its value, has legal authority over operations. Footsteps echo on the stairs above. Hadley appears at the top of the cellar steps, wearing work boots and James's old Vineyard jacket that I haven't been able to put away for 8 years. Leland showed me how to check barrel temperatures this morning, she says. My granddaughter is learning the vineyard from the ground up. 6 weeks after I watched my son arrested for trying to steal this vineyard. I sit in the main house parlor with my 16-year-old granddaughter to offer her the legacy Malcolm destroyed. Hadley's been learning from Leland for the past week. Barrel temperatures, fermentation monitoring, pruning schedules. She shows up at dawn in James's jacket, takes notes, asks questions that prove she's listening. Now she sits across from me at the parlor table where James and I planned harvests 40 years ago. Your father can never inherit this vineyard now. The court made that permanent when he was convicted. Hadley's expression doesn't change. I know. I read the restoration order. Of course she did. The girl who memorized fermentation charts wouldn't skip legal documentation. That means I need to name a new heir. Someone who understands that this place is more than $42 million of real estate. Someone like your grandfather. Hadley's hands fold on the table, calluses forming from cellar work. Are you asking me? I'm offering you what your father tried to steal. Not because you're Malcolm's daughter, despite it. Because you've shown me something he never did. What's that? You chose the vineyard over resentment, work over blame, James's legacy over Malcolm's crimes. December light slants across dormant vines through the parlor windows. Hadley already knows which blocks need attention, which barrels require monitoring. I want to train you to run Stone Valley Vineyards, properly, not as Malcolm's daughter, but as James's granddaughter. Hadley's quiet for a moment. I'm 16. I don't know anything about business management or estate planning. Your grandfather was 22 when we started this vineyard. You'll learn what you need when you need it. What matters is whether you want this responsibility. James would have loved watching Hadley learn the cellar work, his granddaughter choosing wine over college, dirt under her nails instead of diplomas on walls. This isn't about replacing your father. It's about breaking the cycle that corrupted him. Malcolm grew up believing he'd inherit, simply because he was born a stone. He never had to earn it, so he never valued what it represented. Hadley traces a scratch in the table wood. You're skipping a generation. I'm ensuring the vineyard passes to someone who learned its value through work rather than entitlement. Someone who shows up when nobody's watching. Dad showed up, Hadley's voice catches. He worked here for years. Your father worked here because he thought he owned it. You work here because you love it. That's the difference James would have recognized. The grandfather clock ticks steadily in the hall. Why me? Hadley meets my eyes. Why trust me after what Dad did? Because you show up every morning to learn from Leland. Because you wear your grandfather's jacket in the cellar. Because you're choosing this instead of hating me for destroying your parents. Inheritance isn't bloodline. It's who shows up when the vines need pruning and the barrels need checking and nobody's watching to. Applaud. I destroyed my own son to keep this vineyard. I put him in prison to preserve what James built. If I'm wrong about you, if you become another Malcolm, I don't know if I could survive that betrayal twice. Hadley's hand reaches across the table, grips mine with strength from hauling equipment and checking barrels. Her palm is calloused, like James's used to be. I won't disappoint you, I promise. The words land like a vow. Malcolm must have made the same promise to James decades ago, before gambling corrupted whatever good intentions he started with. I'm choosing to trust again, despite that betrayal. Betting everything that Hadley is capable of becoming everything her father refused to be. Then we start your training tomorrow. Leland handles cellar operations. I'll teach you business management, legal structures, client relationships. By the time you're 18, you'll be ready for partnership authority. Hadley's hand in mine feels like James's used to, calloused from work, strong from commitment, steady with purpose. Outside the parlor window, the vineyard stretches toward winter hills, dormant vines waiting for spring pruning. In 2 years, Hadley will legally own what Malcolm tried to steal. But first, she needs to learn what James spent 40 years teaching me. Some lessons take longer than others. 6 months after my son's arrest, I stand in the Cabernet rows at harvest, watching Hadley learn to select clusters the way James taught me 40 years ago. The lessons took as long as they needed. Through winter, spring, and now late June harvest, Hadley learned what Malcolm never bothered to know. How to read soil, balance yield against quality, trust workers who've tended these vines for decades. She moves through rows with Leland, examining grape clusters. The air is thick with the sweet earth smell of ripening Cabernet. Grandma, Leland says these clusters are ready. Should we start the north block? Hadley's face is flushed from June heat, hands purple from checking sugar content. She wears James's old work gloves. Your grandfather would have started it yesterday, but he was always impatient with harvest. Hadley grins. Then we start today. I'll tell the crews. She jogs toward operations, confidence in every stride. 6 months ago, she was 16, watching her parents arrested. Now she's becoming the manager James hoped Malcolm would be. Leland walks over, smile creasing his weathered face. She's a natural, asks the right questions. Partnership authority looks good on her, on all of us. Leland glances at the vineyard stretching toward hills. This is what it was always meant to be. Harvest crews move through rows with practiced efficiency, while Hadley directs operations. The vineyard flourishes, yield strong, vines healthy, operations smooth without fraud corrupting every decision. I won the vineyard and lost my son. Some victories taste like ash, no matter how righteous the fight. The prison visit 3 months ago still sits heavy. Malcolm sat across the table in orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, and said I'd overreacted to his plan, not apologized, not expressed remorse, just claimed I'd destroyed the family over money. Even facing 15 years minimum, he doesn't understand it was never about the money. Laurie's in a separate facility. They'll both be elderly before they see freedom. Malcolm 60 when eligible for parole. The same age I was when James died. The trade was worth it. I'd make it again. But grief doesn't care about righteous choices. Mrs. Stone. Leland's voice pulls me back. You all right? Just thinking about what we almost lost. But didn't. That's what matters. Hadley returns. Workers trailing with equipment. She's learned to walk with authority without arrogance. To lead by working alongside instead of standing above. Malcolm was the quick-growing vine that looked impressive but had shallow roots. One drought and he withered while the patient plants endured. Hadley, come here. Let me show you something your grandfather taught me. She joins me at the oldest Cabernet block vines James and I planted our first year. The gnarled trunks are thick and twisted, bark rough under my palm. The vines that survive longest aren't the flashiest or fastest growing. They're the ones with deep roots and patient strength. I run my hand along ancient wood. Your grandfather understood that. Malcolm never did. Hadley touches the same vine, her calloused hand next to mine. Like you, Grandma. What do you mean? Dad thought your age made you weak. He thought trembling hands and 65 years meant you couldn't fight back. He forgot you built this place from nothing. He forgot patience is sharper than schemes. Smart girl. James's granddaughter through and through. The harvest stretches before us, workers moving through rows, Leland directing bins, clusters piling high. Summer sun slants golden across vines James and I planted, tended, preserved through 40 years. They thought old age was weakness to exploit, trembling hands, forgetful mind, declining competence. They forgot these same hands built this empire from nothing 40 years ago. They forgot that patience accumulated over decades is the sharpest weapon, that roots grow deeper than schemes, and that underestimating someone because of their age is the mistake that costs everything. Malcolm learned that lesson in an orange jumpsuit. I learned it standing here at harvest, surrounded by family that chose me instead of inheriting me. The vines will be here long after I'm gone, tended by hands I taught and trusted. And to you listening to my story, remember, this age is not weakness, and patience is not passivity. Looking back, I wish I'd seen Malcolm's character flaws earlier. I wish I'd questioned why my successful son suddenly had urgent cash needs. Don't make my mistake of ignoring red flags because you love someone. Don't assume family means safety. Trust, even with your own children, must be earned and re-earned through actions, not just bloodline. That's a lesson I learned at 65, but you can learn it today. The real lesson isn't just about elder abuse or financial fraud. It's about the strength we carry inside us, no matter how many years we've lived. When Malcolm put sedatives in my wine, he thought he was exploiting a weak old woman. He forgot that these trembling hands built an empire. He forgot that decades of experience taught me patience he couldn't match. I believe God allowed this trial to show others that underestimating someone because of their age is the worst mistake you can make. Your years don't diminish you, they sharpen you. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment telling me what you think I should have done differently. Would you have confronted Malcolm sooner? Or was playing along the right choice? Share this with someone who needs to hear that their age is their strength, not their weakness. And subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of refusing to be underestimated. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final reminder. While this story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes, the core message about dignity, strength, and standing up for yourself at any age is completely real.